Chapter 317. This shower curtain was hung on an oval steel frame above the bathtub. The background color was light blue, and it was decorated with some slightly darker patterns. In fact, Feng Bujue usually did not use this thing, but he still relied on his excellent memory and keen observation of details to find the abnormality of the shower curtain. The color and shape of the patterns are different from the ones in my house. Feng Bujue muttered, opened the shower curtain, and carefully looked at it. But after looking at it for a long time, he still could not see what these patterns represented. Although he found that these patterns were different from his memory, but if he could not see the hidden message, it would be useless. Could it be that my observation angle is wrong? Feng Bujue thought, and his hands did not stop. He turned the shower curtain over and over and placed it in various positions to look at it, but still to no avail. Wait a minute. Observation angle. Suddenly, his mind flashed, and he thought of a possibility. He immediately took out the flashlight from his pocket and turned it on. Then he walked to the door and turned off the light in the bathroom. When I came to this bathroom, the light was turned on. Generally speaking, no one would take the initiative to turn off the lighting equipment. Feng Bujue muttered and moved the flashlight to the shower curtain. So, I can't see this. At this time, on the light blue shower curtain, the darkest part of the pattern turned into a very conspicuous green, and at the same time, some white patterns also emerged. It turned out that the clue was in front of him all along, but he could not see it. The message on the shower curtain could only be recognized under a certain color of light. When the white light in the bathroom was on, it could not show the clue. At this moment, the yellow beam of the flashlight successfully made some green letters with white edges appear. M, D, D, M, I, R. Feng Bujue found a lot of letters on the shower curtain. He thought that these letters could form words or sentences, but after reading for a while, he found that this was not the case, because most of the letters were repeated, and there was no logic in the arrangement. After he confirmed that he had searched the entire shower curtain, he touched his chin and said, there are 7 letters in total. A-D-I, Kim, O, and R. It appears repeatedly at different frequencies and is disorderly. What exactly is this? He took a few steps back and looked at the unfolded shower curtain from afar. Could it be related to the coordinates of the XY axis? Or is this a 3D image? Or, before he finished speaking, he had already seen through the clues. He quickly took out a notebook and a pen and wrote down the letters on the shower curtain in a neat format. A few minutes later, he solved the puzzle. So it's just a matter of arranging them neatly and eliminating them according to the rules of colliding against each other. Feng Bujue seemed to be a little dismissive of this puzzle, but this did not affect him from getting the correct answer. It didn't take long for him to finish his elimination. All of the D, A, K on the paper had been erased, and the remaining letters, as long as he ignored their vertical position and arranged them on the x-axis, they would be separated by a space and could form a word. Mirror. After all this fuss, you want me to look at a mirror. He came to the sink again, put the flashlight on the side of the sink, and stared at the mirror. But he stood like this for more than a minute, and there was no abnormal reaction. Feng Bujue said, I stared at the mirror before, but I didn't see any hint or trigger any plot. But now that I have solved the puzzle, why is it still? Could it be? He seemed to have an idea again. He picked up the notebook again and looked at the letters that he had erased. The letters D, A, and K that have been erased completely. If we add the most frequent R, wouldn't it be? Feng Bujue laughed. Oh, that's what it means. The next second, he reached out his hand without hesitation and turned off the flashlight. If it were anyone else, they would have hesitated for a while before doing this. After all, he was alone in a small space, and there was a fierce resentment entrenched outside the door. It took a certain amount of courage to let the darkness swallow him in this situation. But Feng Bujue did not feel any pressure at all. He switched off the flashlight, and it was done cleanly. It was just standing in a dark bathroom and staring at a mirror. What was the big deal? At most, an extremely scary image would suddenly appear, accompanied by some kind of hair-raising sound effect. So what? Was he trying to scare people to death? What could it be? Feng Bujue stood in front of the mirror and muttered. Although there was darkness in front of him, he still opened his eyes and looked directly at the mirror. 5 or 6 seconds later, something happened. The surface of the mirror lit up with a faint blue light, and a human face appeared in the mirror. The face looked exactly like Feng Bujue, but it was obviously not a mirror image, because when Brother Bujue saw the face, he turned his neck a few times and made a few obvious expressions, but the face in the mirror did not move with him. The face met Feng Bujue's eyes through the mirror, and there was a faint smile on its face. If a normal person saw this in the dark, their hair would stand on end. But Feng Bujue just watched silently, waiting for the next change. This stalemate lasted for about 10 seconds. Then the Feng Bujue in the mirror smiled and began to speak. My name is Feng Bujue. His voice was exactly the same as Brother Bujue's. I am a novelist who is addicted to weird and scary stories. Every time he said a sentence, he would pause for a moment. I live alone in a big house. Day after day, I write absurd stories. When I look at the sky under the setting sun, it is as if I see a sea of blood in the depths of hell. When I stand in front of the window and listen, I can clearly hear the screams of those who are about to die. Have you seen the gutters? The color inside is different every day. Sometimes it is red like blood, sometimes it is green like pus, sometimes it is yellow like bile. It is actually the river of hell, glowing with a scary neon light. The noise of the factory is mixed with the echo of the underground, drifting above the city. The stench in the air smells like a giant beast vomiting. I realize that maybe I'm not living in the human world, but in hell. Have I gone mad? After saying all this, the face returned to silence. He looked at Feng Bujue as if waiting for an answer. Ha ha, ha ha. Feng Bujue actually laughed at the mirror. Then he mimicked the other party's tone, and he hummed along with a melody that was not obvious. Scream moan the endless darkness of hell, fairies, monsters, and ghosts, holding a decapitated head. Waiting for your arrival, go down, human, quickly fall. After hearing the ballad, the face in the mirror showed a look of bewilderment. What? Do you still want to hear it? Feng Bujue continued. Go down, the endless darkness of hell, burn, drown, beg for death, human, quickly fall. Fall to the bottom of hell. Listen, the dead have begun to sing, in the pool of blood, in the sea of fire, in the mountain of needles. That's enough. The face in the mirror interrupted. Feng Bujue snorted and stopped. He said calmly, when I was 9 years old, I read Lullaby of Hell. I was too young at the time, so I was depressed for 3 days. He paused. As for that memory, I have already forgotten it, but the impression of fear is still there. You used this method to induce fear in me. It is indeed a good strategy, but unfortunately, he shook his head helplessly. Now, under your guidance, I can only clearly recall the scenes and lines in the manga, but the feeling of fear does not come up at all. After hearing this, the face in the mirror began to change. He became the image of a middle-aged European man, bald, beardless, but with long eyebrows. The strangest thing about this face was that his skin was pale, like he had been soaked in formalin for a long time. Okay, you don't have to say any more. The voice of the face changed. You have passed the second test. The second test? Feng Bujue asked. The letter on the shower curtain is the first one. That's right. The face replied. In the 3 tests of wisdom, courage, and benevolence, you have... Wow. Wait. Feng Bujue interrupted him. I haven't finished my questions yet. Don't open up the settings without permission. He said firmly, you have to at least answer one of my questions first. Can I turn on the light now? The face in the mirror replied, yes. Feng Bujue felt his way to the door and turned on the light switch. He then returned to the mirror and asked, okay, who are you? Sato? Huh. The face in the mirror was stunned. Who is Sato? The alien Sato. Feng Bujue said in a matter-of-fact tone, the commander of Power Ranger, the face in the glass column. He said 3 short sentences in a row, but the face still looked confused. I don't know who you were talking about. The face replied hesitantly. Then forget it. Feng Bujue rudely interrupted again. It's good that you haven't seen it. That theme song is very brainwashing. It's hard to get it out of your head after listening to it. That I am the assistant of the boss, the magic mirror. The magic mirror did not know how to continue Feng Bujue's words. He could only try to bring the topic back on track. Oh, so your real body is the face in the mirror and not the mirror itself, Feng Bujue replied. You can say that, tell me. What is your relationship with the hidden mirror man, one of the three giants of the Golden Light puppet show? Who was the hidden mirror man? You can read my memory, but you don't know about the Power Ranger and the hidden mirror man. Feng Bujue asked suddenly. It turned out that his seemingly irrelevant nonsense was all just a test. The magic mirror replied, I can only see very limited fragments. I can't see all of your memory. Okay. Feng Bujue got the answer he wanted. He felt a lot more assured. He said with a smile, Now, you can tell me about the third test. Chapter 3:18. Phew! The magic mirror let out a long sigh. As I said earlier, you have passed 2 tests. His gaze moved slightly, and his eyes focused behind Feng Bujue, landing on the bathroom door. As for the third test, the test of benevolence is actually very simple. You only need to make one choice. Then what is the choice? Feng Bujue followed the magic mirror's words. Forgive or kill, the magic mirror replied. Then can I first ask, what are the chances of winning if I kill? Feng Bujue asked. That's hard to say. After all, they are ghosts with strong resentment, the magic mirror said. Them? Feng Bujue asked. And there's more than one of them? The magic mirror replied, Yes. I would like to ask, what kind of forgiveness is it? Feng Bujue asked. That's what I want to tell you, the magic mirror replied. Feng Bujue understood when he heard that. After solving the riddle of the shower curtain and experiencing the shock of the mirror, he would receive a hint from the magic mirror. Otherwise, he would have to open the door and fight with him, directly triggering a battle. There are 3 ghosts outside the door. They are all fairy tale characters from the same story, the magic mirror said. In that story, they are all very loathsome characters. In the end, they all receive the retribution they deserved. However, the world still hates and spurns them, as if their ending wasn't tragic enough. The magic mirror paused for a second before saying, Now, as long as you open the door behind you, they will appear. At that time, you have to immediately say, I don't hate you. After hearing this, they won't attack me. Feng Bujue asked. Not for the time being, the magic mirror said. The magic mirror said, Next, you have to think of a way to bring up some good points about them to please them. Make them believe that you have sympathy and not disgust. This way, they will leave. Oh, can I ask who these 3 are? Feng Bujue asked again. Cinderella's stepmother and her 2 daughters. The magic mirror replied. Feng Bujue looked at the mirror expressionlessly, blinked a few times, and then said a little woodenly, Oh. After saying that, he turned around and silently took out the death poker. It only took him 5 seconds to pull the latch, turn the lock, and open the bathroom door with one hand. After that, Feng Bujue walked out. The lights in the living room were not turned on, and the curtains were drawn. However, with the help of the light coming from the bathroom door, they could see the scenery within a certain range. Just as Feng Bujue took 2 steps into the living room, 3 translucent ghosts suddenly appeared. The female ghost standing in the middle looked to be in her 40s. She was not ugly, but there was a wicked look between her brows. On either side of her were the ghosts of 2 young women. They were very similar to their mother and were very beautiful. However, at that moment, the 2 sisters were each blind in one eye. Blood seeped out of their eye sockets and covered their clothes. Their legs were also deformed and broken, and they were bleeding on the floor. The appearance of these 3 ghosts was basically the same as Brother Jew had imagined, because he clearly remembered, at the end of the story of Cinderella, the stepmother's 2 daughters cut off their toes, and the other cut off their heels to wear the crystal shoes. After that, they were pecked blind by pigeons. I don't hate you. Feng Bujue followed the magic mirror's instructions and said this sentence. Sure enough, this line was like a protective talisman. After he said it, the female ghost did not pounce on him. They just stood there and looked at Feng Bujue from head to toe. But you have dirted my floor. Your sins are unforgivable. Prepare to die. B*TCH. Feng Bujue suddenly leaped forward. The straight of 7 death poker cards opened in his hands, forming a curved blade of light that lashed out. Relying on this sudden attack, Feng Bujue successfully killed the stepmother's ghost. However, the next step was not easy to deal with. After all, his knee was hit by a hammer. In the next second, the remaining 2 ghosts flew up and darted back and forth. The blade-like claws frequently fell on Feng Bujue's body. When the 2 monsters attacked, their speed was unbelievably fast. They could also pass through walls and obstacles. In less than 10 seconds, Feng Bujue's body had more than 10 bloody wounds. Thankfully, he had Soul's Eye which could prevent fatal injuries. Otherwise, he would not even have the chance to fight back. Both of them are pure spirits, so physical means should be pointless. Feng Bujue dodged as he analyzed the situation. The living room is not a field. The space is small, and they can keep moving in and out of the walls. This will limit the long-range tracking of death poker. Then, there's only one way. Feng Bujue quickly came up with a strategy in his mind. He changed his standing posture slightly and squatted down. He focused his attention on one target and completely ignored the other ghost movements. Just 2 seconds later, a deep claw mark was left on his back. The pain spread quickly, but he did not have time to care. He focused on one of the walls and waited for the target that he was staring at to come out from the wall. That moment came very quickly. Suddenly, Feng Bujue stomped on the ground with one leg and charged forward. The shield effect of death poker was activated at this moment. As the 10 cards disappeared, a golden force field appeared before Feng Bujue. The ghost that was targeted by Feng Bujue had just come out from a wall when she slammed into a wall created by a sorcery weapon. And this wall was something that she could not pass through. This solid collision caused the specter to suffer quite a bit of damage. For a moment, she lost the ability to move at high speed and staggered in midair. Feng Bujue would not miss this opportunity. He gritted his teeth and used his injured leg to support his falling weight. Then he bounced up from the ground with his other leg. He held a poker card in each hand and slashed out 10 dazzling lights in the air. Before he could finish, the spirit dissipated and died. Done. Feng Bujue landed again and knelt on one knee. He opened the game menu for 1 second. After confirming that he had 24% life points left, he turned his attention back to the battle. The last ghost would not be a problem. In a one-on-one situation, the ghost would not be able to touch Feng Bujue at all. Even if she could walk through walls, it would be useless. In less than a minute, Brother Ju had taken care of the monster. He looked at his status. After a few seconds of consideration, he swallowed a piece of SCP-500 and healed all the bleeding and broken bones. Then he returned to the bathroom and looked at the magic mirror. I've mercifully freed them. Chapter 319. Actually, these 3 women are not that smart. You only need to tell some lies to flatter them, and you'll be able to pass, the magic mirror said. The thing I hate the most is to flatter women. Feng Bujue grumbled with annoyance. Furthermore, these are all people that I detest, so I won't say anything nice to them. Just because of that, you're willing to risk your life? The magic mirror asked. I'm different from you. Feng Bujue smiled. I know, when faced with threats, you'll tell any kind of lie. Then, he took out the wrench and raised it before the mirror. Speak. Who is the most handsome person in the world? The magic mirror's lips twitched. I think there's some kind of misunderstanding between us. You dare say it's not me? Feng Bujue widened his eyes and raised his voice to threaten. First, your threat is meaningless. Even if you shatter this mirror, it won't do any damage to my real body, the magic mirror said. Secondly, back then, the queen did threaten me, and I had no choice but to lie, but at least she was the second most beautiful woman in the world. But you? Oh, I'm the most handsome man, so I don't need to threaten you. Feng Bujue scratched his chin. The misunderstanding between us seems to be getting deeper. The magic mirror was breaking out in cold sweat. All right, I'm just kidding. Feng Bujue laughed. Sigh, you lack a sense of humor. It's your sense of humor that has no bottom line. Feng Bujue shrugged. It doesn't matter how you look at it. By the way, I should have passed the test, right? Obviously not, the magic mirror replied. Can killing them be considered benevolence? So, Fong Bujua tossed out another ambiguous question. This was his usual tactic when conversing with NPCs. However, since you've passed the test of intelligence and courage, you'll be rewarded, the magic mirror said. What reward? Fong Bujua asked. You can ask me 2 questions, the magic mirror replied. Right then, the system said, the question has to be related to the scenario, or will be taken as a forfeit. Let me think. Fong Bujua said as he crossed his arms, frowned, and began to pace back and forth in the bathroom. The magic mirror didn't rush him and just waited quietly. It took Fong Bujua a full 10 minutes to think about the content of the question. After much deliberation, he finally made a decision. I've thought about it. Fong Bujua stood in front of the mirror and said, my first question is, between the test building and here, which is the real world? The reality in his question naturally referred to the reality in the scenario and had nothing to do with the world outside Thriller Paradise. Neither. The magic mirror actually gave such an answer. Oh, this answer was beyond Fong Bujua's expectations. His original analysis was that this memory space was the real world of the scenario, and the test building was the mental world of the boss. However, after getting the actual answer, Fong Bujua thought about it and got it. You're right. The fact that I can bring the items from the test building into this space proves that. Your second question is, who is the mental host of these 2 spaces? The magic mirror made this assumption based on Fong Bujua's first question. However, Fong Bujua shook his head. Isn't it too boring to ask that directly? Then, what is your second question? The magic mirror asked again. Actually, I don't have any more questions. It will be more interesting for me to solve the mystery myself, but Fong Bujua replied. Let's just ask a question that is not that important, but that I'm interested in. He paused and said, who is this boss? I can only give you his name. The magic mirror's pale face had a troubled expression. After all, the concept of who was a bit vague. There were too many things that could be given in detail, such as occupation and personality. That's enough, Fong Bujua said. James Moriarty, the magic mirror said. Ah, Fong Bujua raised his brow, and a smile appeared on his lips. Oh, so it's the professor. My mission has been completed, traveler from another dimension. After answering these 2 questions, the magic mirror prepared to leave. If you can escape from here and return to the test building, you'll be able to meet the professor. After Fong Bujua found out about the boss identity, the magic mirror changed the way it addressed Moriarty. Then goodbye. Then, the magic mirror's face faded in the mirror until it completely disappeared. Several seconds later, the mirror flickered and turned back into a normal mirror. Fong Bujua saw his own face in the mirror again. Humph. The path to the 7th floor is a waterfall. Is that what it means? Fong Bujua mumbled. Or am I overthinking things? He mumbled to himself and walked out of the bathroom. He walked to the other end of the living room and reached for the light switch. The light was switched on, and before his eyes was a familiar environment and furniture. Even Arthas's cat litter and bowl were where he remembered them. However, the cat that did not treat its owner with respect was not simulated. I can't open it? Fong Bujua tried to open the door, but this time, the system gave him a simple and classic notification. Cannot open. Therefore, like a typical puzzle game, Fong Bujua started a carpet search of his home. After ingesting the SCP-500, Brother Ju's condition returned to normal. However, his life points were still at 30%. Considering that he had just consumed the supplement, he did not rush to replenish his life points. This was because the effect of the potion was more obvious the shorter the time interval. Without the time limit and danger, it was better to let his life points recover naturally. Very good. It's completely dark. Fong Bujua pulled back the curtain and realized that the darkness outside was as thick as ink. He could not open the window. This saved me a lot of trouble. This means that the area that needs to be checked is only inside the house. He immediately came up with a plan. He would first search the entire living room to the kitchen with the lights on. After all, his kitchen was connected to the living room. He would then turn off the lights and do it again. After he was done with the outside, he would use the same method to check the bedroom. This time, his search soon yielded results. However, he did not find any clues that would help him progress the plot. Instead, he found a skill card. Name: Southern Dipper Flying Dragon Fist Skill Card Property. Active, permanent, skill type, fighting effect. Uses both hands to unleash high-speed attacks to destroy the target. Cooldown time: 30 minutes. Consumption: 800 stamina points. Learning requirement: Fighting serene. One of the ultimate skills of the Flying Dragon Fist. When attacking, it can disrupt the opponent's breathing and break down part of their defense, causing physical destruction. The place where he found this skill card was very interesting. It was hidden inside the gaming hub. Ha ha. Feng Bujue was overjoyed and laughed. Finally, I've drawn a powerful skill. Ha! For a long time, the thing that Feng Bujue had been chasing, or rather, the thing that he had been lacking, was a killer move. Since he started playing Thriller Paradise, he had obtained quite a number of active skills. There was the Devilish Brat's Lower Whip Kick, which was a heaven-defying control skill. There was also the Evil King's Black Dragon Flame Wave, which was a super strong attack skill. However, these skills had a limit to the number of times they could be used. In addition, continuous skills such as Body Enhancement Technique and Descent of the War Demon were very useful and had significant effects, but they all belonged to the type of strengthening one's physical fitness, and the consumption and price were not small. Also, the title ability that had just been replaced, Watch Out, was not worth mentioning, and now, Feng Bujue had finally gotten what he wanted. He had obtained a true killer move. This Southern Dipper Flying Dragon Fist was an active skill that could be considered average in terms of power, consumption, cooldown, and activation. It was understandable that Feng Bujue was overjoyed. He didn't hesitate to learn the skill. After all, he wouldn't consider selling this skill. If he had to give it to someone, in Underworld Frontline, other than Passing Rain, only Brother Jew's fighting mastery had reached C class. On the other hand, Passing Rain was used to using a long sword. This kind of barehanded move was not suitable for her. She might not even want it. Therefore, Feng Bujue had no reason to keep this skill. After learning the skill card, he calmed down his somewhat excited emotions and started searching again. To be honest, the feeling of searching this house was very strange. After all, this was his own home. Even though Feng Bujue was renting a house, he had lived there for several years already. Ever since his parents died, he had been living here. In this world, there shouldn't be anyone who would search his own house. In daily life, there might be times when you can't find something. At this time, you would usually ask your family members who lived with you. If you lived alone, you could only remember by yourself. When you really couldn't remember, you would start to search aimlessly. But search and search were two different concepts. What was search? Search was not to find a specific thing, but to find everything that might be valuable. To put it bluntly, it was similar to searching a house. But who would search their own house? And when your own house became a scene in a game, searching may be more difficult than searching for an unfamiliar environment. Because in daily life, there were many things that often appeared in front of our eyes. The human brain's instinct to filter information might automatically make us ignore the existence of these things. Soon, Feng Bujue noticed this problem. Looks like it will take more time and effort than expected. I have to deliberately change my mindset and treat this place as an unfamiliar environment. Chapter 320. After changing his perspective, Feng Bujue quickly found where the first clue was hidden: the protective film on the LCD TV. He leaned closer to the TV screen and observed carefully, only to find that there were many strange marks on the film. He immediately tore the film off the surface of the TV and held it under the light, but he still couldn't understand the message on it. The film itself is transparent, and the bumps on the marks are not obvious. He thought with great interest, and after a few seconds, he had an idea. Feng Bujue quickly went to the kitchen and took out the vacuum cleaner from the cabinet. He turned on the machine and saw that the dust collection bag was half full. He felt that there was hope, so he immediately took the film, spread it out, and sprinkled the dust evenly on the film. Sure enough, under the cover of the dust, some letters appeared. Huh! I remember playing sand painting when I was a child. Fong Budua said, patted the dust on his hands, and then looked at the letters M, V, MJ, Ewan. The 7 English letters were the hints on the film. The letters were arranged horizontally. Except for the J and U, which had a gap between them, the other letters were equally spaced apart. 7 letters. What do they mean? Fong Bujua muttered. The English initials of the Calabash brothers? He said half-jokingly, but this sentence really gave him an idea. Could it be? Fong Bujua glanced at the letters again, and then a smile appeared on his face. Oh, it's the 8 planets. In fact, Brother Ju's knowledge of astronomy was very average. But fortunately, he at least knew the order of the 8 planets, and the English spelling of 6 of them. He didn't know the exact spelling of Uranus and Neptune, but he still remembered the first letters of these 2 words. After he thought of this hypothesis, he quickly walked to the bookshelf in the living room and pulled out a book about astronomy. Fong Bujua's bookshelf was like his brain, organized in a very orderly manner. The books were categorized according to letter, category, year, and other multiple priorities. No matter what kind of information he wanted to find, he could immediately find the relevant book. Some people might ask, it's 2055, what can't you just look it up on the internet? Of course, Fong Bujua usually looked up a lot of things on the internet, but he firmly believed that the internet was not omnipotent. It was impossible for humans to input all the information in the world into the computer, and it was impossible to guarantee that the input information could be found on the internet. Moreover, the contents of many textbooks, reference books, and manuals were far more detailed and accurate than the encyclopedia on the internet. In addition, the most important problem, Fong Bujua just confirmed that the computer, game cabin, phone, and fax in a room were all malfunctioning. The TV could be turned on, but there was no signal at all, and there was no video on the hard drive. According to the distance from the Sun, the order is Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. Fong Bujua flipped through the book and read. The 7 letters on the membrane correspond to the first 5 and the last 2 planets respectively, and the empty one is undoubtedly Saturn. He put down the book and looked up. The empty letter is S. He picked up the membrane and temporarily put it on the kitchen counter. He took a bowl from the cupboard and pressed it down. Or is it hinting to me the word Earth? Or is it hinting to Saturday? Saturn is the root of Saturday. Although the riddle was solved, it was hard to tell what this hint was referring to. Then, obviously, there's more than one clue. Fong Bujua held his chin with one hand and said, "This riddle is just one piece of the whole puzzle." The search began again, and another 10 minutes passed. This time, he found an anomaly on the back of the wall clock. It was a small blue wall clock, perfectly round and flat. The internal hands and numbers were all white and made of plastic. At first glance, it was a cheap item that could be bought for less than $20. The back of the wall clock was black, and the design was very simple. On the back of the 12 o'clock, there was a convex space for hanging. Further down, in the middle, there was a battery slot, the kind that didn't even have a lid, and it had a built-in AA battery. Next to the battery slot, there was a round plastic gear, or rather a dial. This was used to adjust the time, and it was directly connected to the minute hand. At this moment, Fong Bujua found the anomaly. When he turned the dial on the back of the wall clock, it was not the minute hand that moved, but the hour hand. To be honest, the person who found this clue was a pain in the ass. The people who played Zelda without looking at the strategy guide couldn't be better. The hint is the hour hand. Fong Bujua read, Hour hand, Li Shi Zhen, Compendium of Materia Medica, J. Cho, hot girl. His thoughts had broken through the sky in a few seconds. Hour hand. Does it represent time? Time. His thoughts turned away from the spicy hot pot. No, if it's referring to time, the minute hand or second hand would also work. There are many ways to let me find the anomaly, such as turning the dial upside down. He looked at the clock again. Is it referring to hour? Hour. Feng Bujue put the wall clock on the coffee table in front of the sofa. If this clue is referring to hour, then the clue on the film is Saturday. He pondered. Interesting. After the second clue appeared, the situation was still unclear, and it seemed to be getting more and more complicated. Feng Bujue continued to search in the living room. This time, he turned the sofa over, moved a lot of furniture, opened the cabinets, pulled out the drawers, emptied the fridge, and even dismantled a lot of daily necessities. Still, he found nothing. When Feng Bujue came to the cat litter, he suddenly said, "Why did I use dust instead of cat litter?" It turned out that he did not have an idea, but he thought that he could also use cat litter to solve the mystery of the film. I might as well search this as well. He lifted the tray of cat litter and poured the contents on the floor. However, there was only a thin layer of cat litter. Nothing else was hidden. Feng Bujue was about to put down the tray and leave when he saw a notification at the bottom of the tray. There were 2 sets of numbers engraved there, 599 and 602. Okay, what does this mean? Feng Bujue squatted there and said, 602 seems to be related to time, but 599 is more far-fetched. Postal code? Phone number? Citizen ID? SCP code name? His mind was spinning fast. Wait. Feng Bujue's eyes suddenly flashed with something. He almost jumped up and said hurriedly, "This is the page number, 599 to 602. He jogged to the front of the bookshelf, and his eyes moved quickly on the bookshelf. In 2 minutes, based on his observation of the thickness, he had filtered out all the books with less than 500 pages. I am so stupid. Feng Bujue raised his right hand and gently knocked on his head. The answer to the film is, and the clock's notification is the same. The answer to the riddle is just a letter. He quickly turned his eyes to the side of the bookshelf, where the books started with S or H. 90% of the books on the bookshelf are Chinese books, excluding those with insufficient pages. I can look for the first letter of the first Chinese character in the title, but I can't rule out the possibility that the notification refers to the first letter of the English translation of the title. Just as he thought of this, the name of a book popped up in Feng Bujue's mind. Ha! He laughed foolishly, and his constantly moving eyes stopped. 10 seconds later, he reached out and pulled out a thick book from somewhere on the bookshelf. He took the book to the living room and placed it on the coffee table. Then, Feng Bujue returned to the kitchen, looked at the dusty film, picked it up, and threw it into the trash can. Then he took out an aluminum kettle from the cupboard, filled it with tap water, put it on the gas stove, and began to boil water. It will take about 5 to 10 minutes to boil. Feng Bujue scanned the messy living room again. I have found the answer to the 3 clues, so the mystery in the living room should be solved. He turned his head to look at the bedroom door and said, "Let's take a few minutes to go in and take a look." After making up his mind, Feng Bujue went to get a mop at home, then walked to the bedroom door. He tried to turn the doorknob, and it worked. He carefully pushed the door open a crack, and the light in the bedroom was on. He put the mop in and checked it up and down like a minesweeper. After making sure it was fine, he pushed the door open. But when he opened the door, he saw the scene in the bedroom. The only thought that popped up in his mind was, I must have opened it the wrong way. "Hi," the beauty on the bed used a sweet voice to greet Brother Bujue. The woman was lying on Feng Bujue's bed, and she was only wearing very simple clothes. Under a transparent gauze nightgown, her purple underwear was completely exposed. Her perfectly round and towering breasts were also faintly discernible. Her fragrant shoulders, slender waist, and 2 snow-white slender thighs outlined a magnificent arc. Her long hair was slightly wavy, scattered behind her head, and fell all the way to Feng Bujue's pillow. Her beauty was needless to say, but the most important thing was her pair of flirtatious eyes. Amidst the rolling autumn waves, there was endless charm. This game is getting more and more awesome. Feng Bujue's expression was dignified as he complained. "Handsome, do you need something?" The beauty asked. "Sure, it depends on what you need." Feng Bujue replied without any integrity. "What do you need? Come here." The beauty patted the edge of the bed. "Come, sit here." That. Phone Bujua used a quarter of a second to come up with an excuse. I'm boiling water. Yo, you're quite shy. The beauty said. No, no, no. I'm a very casual person. Phone Bujua said, I don't want to get close to you because of my own safety. What? You're afraid I'll eat you? As the beauty spoke, she slightly raised her lips, wrinkled her tall nose, and stuck out the tip of her tongue to lick her lips. It could be said that she was extremely teasing. That's right. Phone Bujua nodded. If it weren't for this, I would have already thrown away my rationality, restraint, and self-esteem and closed the door. What are you talking about? The beauty said again. She twisted her delicate body, sparing no effort to seduce her target. I'm talking nonsense with you, and wondering why you don't directly attack me. Phone Bujua replied. After he said this, he suddenly thought of something. Oh, I see. It was unknown what he understood, but as he spoke, he stepped into the bedroom. But he still didn't get close to the bed, and only stood at a certain distance from the beauty. What exactly are you? Phone Bujua narrowed his eyes and stared at the other party. Anyway, sooner or later I'll figure it out, or test it out. Why don't you tell me yourself? In a very short moment, the beauty's expression slightly changed, but she quickly put on a smiling face. What are you talking about? I can't hear you, huh? Bah. Phone Bujua prepared a mouthful of saliva in his mouth and spat it at the other party from a distance. A second later, the saliva landed on the beauty's thigh. The room fell into silence. Looks like you're not a ghost. Phone Bujua said seriously. What are you doing? The beauty's face already had a murderous expression. Testing. Phone Bujua picked up the air conditioner remote control and the TV remote control, crossed the two objects, and showed them to the other party. Another awkward silence. You're also not a vampire. 10 seconds later, Phone Bujua put down the cross and said thoughtfully, If you don't have anything else, go. The beauty seemed to want to drive him away. Go what? Phone Bujua interrupted. This is my room. He paused, but I'm going to go out for a while. He showed a malicious look. On the bookshelf outside, there are several versions of the Bible. When I come back, I'll bring one with me and a silver table knife. Okay. The beauty sat up and sighed. Succubus. Oh, Phone Bujua said. You should have said so earlier. He said after the fact. I guessed it was this. Then why did you spit at me? What's wrong? Phone Bujua said righteously. If I took off my underwear, lay on your bed, and flirted with you, would you spit at me? As a monster, the other party really didn't know how to answer his question. The succubus reverted to her original form. Her skin had turned light purple, and curled goat horns had sprouted from her forehead. A pair of small bat wings had sprouted from her back, and a thin, pointed tail had sprouted from her buttocks. Even the clothes she was wearing had changed into a tight, low-cut leather jacket. If you let me go, I promise not to hurt you. Since her identity had been exposed, the succubus said directly, Do you think, after you failed to kill me and your identity was exposed by me, you can still believe what you said? Phone Bujua asked. Then what do you want? The succubus asked. Do you have anything to tell me? Phone Bujua said. Or do you have anything to give me? What do you want? The succubus showed an evil smile again. I don't want your body. Phone Bujua replied very seriously. How boring. The succubus reached her hand to the front of the leather jacket and took out a key from between her breasts as if nothing had happened. She raised it and said, You want this, right? Throw it over. Phone Bujua said directly. Come and get it, the succubus replied. Huh, you still have this idea? Phone Bujua sneered. You want me to walk into the range of the heptagram? You're daydreaming. I threw the key to you. If you leave, then won't I be trapped here forever? The succubus asked. Nonsense. Phone Bujua replied firmly. What if I walk over and you beat me? What if I get beat by you? Then you can kill me and smear the array with my brain matter. Won't you still be able to escape? To be honest, I'm not interested in a man like you who uses magic array sheets. The succubus said as she lifted the quilt under her body. It turned out that Brother Bujua's bedsheet pattern was the magic array recorded in the Lesser Key of Solomon, a mystical book written in the Middle Ages that contained all the rituals and magic to summon and control demons and angels. This thing, it had to be mentioned, was a dark history. Young people in the middle of the 21st century were very happy to show their individuality. Mobile phone ringtones, internet avatars, t-shirts, and so on, other people's designs could no longer satisfy them. Therefore, various DIY-related industries came into being. Feng Bujue's bedsheet was such a product. The process of its birth was as follows. That day, Feng Bujue ran to a DIY shop and bought a plain bedsheet. Then the boss asked him what kind of pattern he wanted to print on it. Just as the shop's waiter opened the material file on the computer for customers to choose from, Brother Ju picked up a piece of white paper, waved a big pen, and drew the heptagram, a combination of the 7 stars of Solomon and the 5 stars of Aries. The main body was a heptagram with a ring on the outside. The inside was a hexagram replacing the scorpion symbol of the 7 stars, and each side had a Latin spell. The onlookers were shocked. The waiter thought he was a member of a cult, and the boss vaguely felt that Brother Ju was a member of the tattoo shop across the street who came to challenge him. In short, under the complicated gazes of the group of people, Brother Ju took the bedsheet home. Cut the crap. If you weren't going to attack me, why did you ask me to take it? Feng Bujue said, hurry up and throw it over, or I'll go out and make a bathtub of holy water. Holy water is very simple to make. It only needs ordinary water, and it can be done by praying, put in a water gun, and come over to torture you. The succubus looked at Feng Bujue for a few seconds in surprise, and then threw the key to him. Okay, I'm not interested in a man who has a water gun at home. Chapter 321. After this conversation, Feng Bujue and the succubus had come to an agreement. At that moment, the succubus turned from a monster into an NPC and no longer had the intention to attack. However, the system did not give any hint about this. After accepting the key, it was still up to Feng Bujue to decide whether to release the succubus or not. Feng Bujue studied the key for a few seconds and then looked at the item description. Name, cursed key type, plot item quality, normal function. The holder will be haunted by misfortune. This item cannot be discarded, destroyed, or traded. Can be taken out of the scenario. No remark. After the corresponding door is opened, the key will be consumed. Seeing the effect of the key, Feng Bujue was reminded of the second message. When you think you have gotten what you want, you have actually lost more. Sigh, I think I understand why you are trapped in my bed, Feng Bujue grumbled. I was just unlucky, the succubus replied. Your room is only so big. After I entered through the wall, I only flew 1 meter before I reached the top of your bed. Who would have thought someone would use King Solomon's magic circle as a pattern on the bedsheet? From her response, it appeared like she did not know the nature of this cursed key. Feng Bujue was not surprised because he understood why. The perspective of the characters in the scenario was different from the perspective of a traveler from another world like himself. In the succubus' eyes, this was just a key. If no one told her that this thing would bring misfortune to the holder, naturally, she would not have known about it. From the player's perspective, they could see the related description of this item through the game menu. Of course, the player's perspective would bring a corresponding problem. For example, the succubus could hand over the key, but Feng Bujue would not be able to give it away or give it away. Do you mind if I ask where you got this key? Feng Bujue asked. The boss told me to bring this to you, the succubus replied. Huh? Feng Bujue was puzzled. He asked you to deliver something to me. So why didn't you just tell him the purpose of your visit? After falling into the trap, he kept trying to lure me in and kill me. Who said I was going to kill you? The succubus patted the edge of the bed and smiled charmingly. Just now, when I asked you to come over, did I have to kill you? Can't I do something else? I can give you the key after that. When Feng Bujue heard this, he experienced it again. It seemed that this sentence was the answer to the saying, when you think you have gotten what you want, you have actually lost more. However, he knew very well that Thriller Paradise would not have any erotic elements. It was probably because the succubus had already obtained the key that she said that line, as if the players had a chance to take advantage of it. Actually, if he had really gone over just now, he would definitely have been attacked, and there was even a possibility of triggering an instant death flag. Feng Bujue had seen this kind of method many times when he played single-player games. Some depressing games loved to use this method. Before the ending, you were given a choice. You chose A, and the ending was a scam. Then you loaded and chose B, thinking that you would be able to see the real ending, but you realized that the real ending was even scarier. It was like someone placed a biscuit before you, and you were given the choice to eat it or not. If you ate it, you would die from the poison. If you didn't, he would eat the biscuit and say, "It's so delicious, but unfortunately, you won't be able to eat it anymore." Woo! Coincidentally, the water in the kitchen boiled and the kettle buzzed. Feng Bujue turned to leave. "Hey, you haven't." The succubus wanted to stop him. "I'll be back after you turn off the fire." Feng Bujue knew what she was going to say, so he interrupted her and walked into the kitchen. 2 minutes later, he turned off the stove and returned to the bedroom with a pair of scissors. To be sure, before Feng Bujue got close to the bed, he took out the bell of Jin Gang and activated its special effect. In the end, he triggered the first command, which was to observe the details of an NPC. Name: Succubus NPC Faction, Detective Club level. Height: 165 centimeters. Weight: 42 kilograms. Can be triggered into battle. Yes, supplementary plot. Cursed key: since it's not a monster's information, it means that the battle can be avoided. Based on my interaction with her, as long as I don't actively attack her, there shouldn't be a problem. Feng Bujue thought. "What are you doing?" the succubus urged. Feng Bujue was afraid that things might get out of hand, so he did not waste any more time. It's nothing." He took 2 steps forward, grabbed the corner of the bedsheet, and quickly cut it toward the middle. Creatures trapped by Solomon's circle would not be able to destroy the circle with their own power. No matter how weak the circle was, even if it was made from fallen leaves or building blocks, it would be blown away by the wind. The trapped creature would be helpless. However, if a creature that was not affected by the circle, like a human, walked into the circle, the trapped creature could use the creature's blood to corrupt the circle and escape. Earlier, when Feng Bujue pushed open the bedroom door, he was not moved by the erotic scene. Instead, he quickly saw through the succubus's state of being trapped inside the circle. Therefore, he gained the initiative and entered a plot line that could be pushed forward without a battle. 10 seconds later, when the edge of the heptagram was cut open, Feng Bujue suddenly felt a weight on his shoulder. An invisible pressure suddenly appeared. This was no doubt a sign that the succubus had recovered her power. At the same time, the pair of small bat wings on the succubus' back fluttered slightly, and then she floated up. "Humph! I'm unlucky today," she said with dissatisfaction. She turned around and left the room through the wall. Sigh. Feng Bujue looked down at the key in his hand. "From now on, it's my turn to be unlucky." He put the key in the pocket of his coat and left the bedroom. When he returned to the kitchen, Feng Bujue placed the scissors back into the drawer and closed the drawer completely. Then, he used an alert gaze to scan his surroundings. Just how serious is this misfortune? His eyes soon fell on the knife rack. Is it the kind of final destination where you might die at any moment? As he spoke, his eyes moved to the ground. Or is it the kind of final destination where you might fall down and break 2 of your front teeth while you're walking normally? In fact, he was overthinking. If the curse key really had such an immediate and fatal lethality, the succubus would have noticed the abnormality on the way here. She would not have waited until Feng Bujue's bedroom to fall into the trap because of carelessness. 5 minutes later, Feng Bujue came to the living room with a cup of instant coffee brewed with boiling water. He put the coffee on the coffee table first, then returned the overturned sofa to its original position and sat down comfortably. He picked up the coffee and took a sip. Then he let out a carefree ah, as if he was a drug addict who had just taken a sip of powder. If I remember correctly, pages 599 to 602 should be. Feng Bujue put down the coffee cup, crossed his legs, and flipped open the book that had been placed there previously. It's indeed The Return of John. That's right, S. Hint was referring to the complete Detective Sherlock Holmes on Feng Bujue's bookshelf. Reading addiction was not developed in a day. As the saying goes, A journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. For Fong Bujue, this book was the starting point of a long journey. When he was young, he was indeed different from other children. Although he also liked to play games and read comics, his talent and passion for reading were obviously much stronger than his peers, even surpassing that of adults. This Sherlock Holmes complete collection contained all the Sherlock Holmes stories written by Conan Doyle. Fong Bujue had bought it with the pocket money that he had saved for a long time when he was still in primary school. His family was not rich, and his pocket money was pitiful, so he bought a small print. The book had more than 1,400 pages, and the words were printed very small. It looked quite tiring. However, Fong Bujue still read the book countless times and kept the book very well. He never flipped through the book while eating, nor did he touch the paper with his greasy or stained hands. He couldn't even bear to fold the corner. Every time, he remembered which page he was on. More than 10 years had passed, and the book was still on his bookshelf. Although the paper looked slightly yellow, the words inside were still very clear. There was not a single fold to be found. "I never thought that I would open this book again," Fong Bujue muttered. His attention was quickly drawn to the words in front of him. Pages 599 to 602 were part of the story of the empty house, and the empty house was a story in the return of Conan Doyle. From the perspective of a veteran reader like Fong Bujue, the return of Conan Doyle was the beginning of the decline of the series. Later, The Uncanny Valley, The Last Regards, and The New Detective were not as rigorous in their logical reasoning as the earlier books. The Sherlock Holmes of this period seemed to be able to accurately determine a person's thoughts and determine the cause and effect of a case from the change of the face, the change of the eyes, the closing of the lips, the clenching or unclenching of the fist. This phenomenon, to a certain extent, reflected that Mr. Conan Doyle had gradually lost his passion for writing such stories. He only wrote them to satisfy the wishes of publishers and readers. This was also why the Sherlock Holmes stories after 1902 were not as successful as the previous books. Today's Fong Bujue could actually empathize with Conan Doyle's state of mind. Many writers were like this. When they wrote stories with a high degree of creative enthusiasm, no one cared about them. But when they became famous, even if they fell into a creative slump, there were still people willing to pay a high price for them to submit manuscripts. A Study in Scarlet was written in April 1886. At that time, Conan Doyle submitted manuscripts everywhere, but there was no way to get it published. It wasn't until Christmas 1887 that he was able to publish it in a Christmas annual. And just 5 years later, when Conan Doyle himself wanted to decline, the Strand magazine was willing to pay him £1,000 in exchange for 12 short stories. As a writer who didn't want to write for a long time, but was still forced to do so for many years, Conan Doyle had it tough. Oh, is it the part where Holmes tells Watson about his escape from Reichenbach Falls? Fong Bujue finished reading the contents of page 599 and had basically recalled what was written on the last 3 pages, but he continued to read. "I didn't fall at all. When I found Professor Moriarty with a sinister face standing on a narrow path to safety, I didn't doubt that my end had come. In his gray pupils, I saw the ruthless intention." Fong Bujue repeated Holmes' description. The description of the struggle. Haha, it's basically no description. Then old Moriarty fell, and the scene was, I stuck my head out and saw him fall for a long distance, then hit a rock, then bounced back and finally fell into the water. Fong Bujue picked up the coffee and took another sip. From this paragraph, Moriarty is definitely dead. Unless his physical fitness is close to Captain America's, and after suffering such heavy injuries, he could still swim out from the waterfall. He paused. If that's the case, then the boss of the detective club, is he a ghost? Something suddenly flashed across his eyes. If he's alive, then the one who fell was a substitute? But what kind of substitute would be able to fool Holmes's eyes? He put down the coffee cup. Or perhaps old Moriarty of the detective club is just a projection of Moriarty from a certain period in the original work, just like the other characters in the fairy tales and novels in the test building. Perhaps only the professor himself would know the answer to this question. So Fong Bujue put it aside for now and continued to read. He could read 10 lines at a glance, but now he was looking at each word carefully and trying to remember what the original English sentence had been like. He had Sherlock Holmes books in English, but they were in series, and there were no more than 500 pages in each. At the moment the professor fell into the abyss, I suddenly realized that this was a unique opportunity that fate had arranged for me. On the cliff that you said was a precipice, there were actually a few small footholds and a place that resembled a ledge. It is obviously impossible to climb all the way up such a high cliff, but it is even more impossible to walk along that narrow, wet path without leaving footprints. Feng Bujue read this and could not help but grumble. No wonder he's the role model of our generation. Once he decided to fake his death, he followed through with it. He would rather take the risk of real death to climb the precipice. Looking further down, the descriptions from 600 to 601 were mainly about Holmes' climbing experience. During this process, one of Moriarty's accomplices, who had been lying in ambush nearby, attacked Holmes twice with large rocks. If this were a fantasy novel, our great detective would probably have fallen, and then the story of how he survived falling off the cliff and obtained magic weapons, beautiful women, or a portable grandfather would unfold. Unfortunately, in this early 20th century novel, the role of the protagonist's halo was just this. When I grabbed the edge of the ledge with both hands and my body was hanging in the air, another rock fell beside me with a whoosh. My foot missed, and fortunately, God forbid, I fell in the path below the cliff. I fell with a bloody head, got up, and hurried away. I walked 10 miles in the dark in the mountains. A week later, I arrived in Florence. By then, no one in the world knew where I was. Feng Bujue finished reading this paragraph and said, This week's content could be written as a survival in the wild fanfiction. Finally, there was the content from 601 to 602, which was also the end of this description. This paragraph was mainly composed of 2 parts. The first part was about where Sherlock Holmes had gone to train during the years he was missing. I traveled in Tibet for 2 years, often going to Lhasa to chat with the Great Lama. You may have seen the excellent report of a Norwegian named Sigerson, but I am sure you would never have guessed that it was news of your dear friend. Then I passed through Persia, visited the Holy Land of Mecca, and went to Khartoum, the capital of the Sudan, to pay a brief but interesting visit to the Caliph, the head of the Islamic State, the result of which I shared with the Foreign Office. Back in Europe, I spent several months in a laboratory at Montpellier in the south of France, studying the derivatives of coal tar. I completed this research to my satisfaction and was ready to return when I heard that only one of my enemies remained in London. And the second part was about the remainder of Moriarty's party. This passage is not very clear, for on page 600 Holmes says, Moriarty is not the only man who has sworn to kill me, but there are at least 3 others who have done the same, and their desire for vengeance only grew stronger with the death of their leader. But on page 601, this number changed to 2. These 2 were described as important figures in Moriarty's criminal syndicate, and they were successfully exonerated in court. On page 602, there was only 1 person. Feng Bujue had considered these questions when he was reading the book. Of course, the simplest explanation was that the author was just joking around. Indeed, this change in the number of people was not that important in the original work, and it had nothing to do with the main story. Moriarty's criminal empire had already crumbled the moment his king fell. But now, in Thriller Paradise, in the scenario where they faced Moriarty's virtual character, the system had set 599 to 602 as a very clear hint. Then Brother Jew had to consider this as a realistic situation. The Swiss boy in the last case has escaped. Watson's analysis is sound. This boy should be one of Moriarty's henchmen, but he is obviously insignificant. Feng Bujue closed the book and raised his head to read. Assuming the person who attacked Holmes on the ledge is one of the 3, the other 2 are characters who have never made an appearance and only exist in the description. His brain was racing. Is the decrease in the number of people due to death, capture, or hiding? He turned his gaze to the key in his hand. And what is the direct connection between the content of these 4 pages and this key and my escape from this room? Chapter 322. After drinking this cup of coffee, Feng Bujue realized that his stamina points had recovered significantly. It looked like part of the food in the scenario had a hidden recovery function. Looks like the snacks sold at the market are not purely to satisfy the player's appetite or to make them look cool. Feng Bujue looked at his status in the game menu and mumbled to himself, but snacks don't have any description. Which kind of food has which kind of non-obvious property? I'll have to test it out myself in the scenario. As he said that, he took out a bag of beef jerky from his pocket. Feng Bujue had bought this bag of stuff together with the other tools at the convenience store near the testing area. When he was counting the items in the bathroom, he did not include this in his inventory. At the time, he had bought this bag of snacks because he needed to act dumb. At the time, Brother Ju's true identity as a professional gamer had not been exposed. He did not want to tell his teammates that he had bought a bunch of useful tools, so he had bought a bag of snacks as a cover. Perhaps it was a rule in the scenario, but even after the baptism of the waterfall, none of the items that he did not put in his inventory were lost. When Feng Bujue got out of the bathtub, all the items were still in his pocket. Will the bad luck cause me to choke to death while eating snacks? After Feng Bujue opened the bag, he was reminded of this question. However, he did not dwell on it. He shrugged and put the beef jerky into his mouth. As he munched on the snack, his mind was thinking about the content on pages 599 to 602. This is my memory space. Other than the puzzles added by the system, everything here should be simulated from my memory. In other words, the words in this book, including the contents of the astronomy book that I was reading earlier, were originally things in my mind. Feng Bujue turned his gaze back to the bookshelf and thought to himself, my memory is not bad. Most of the things that I've seen will leave an impression on me. And in this space, even the information that only exists in my subconscious should be able to be reconstructed. At this time, Feng Bujue had already gobbled up half a bag of beef jerky. He glanced at the game menu, and, as expected, his life points had increased by 5%. Even though it was not much, it was an additional recovery. Including this period of adjustment, Feng Bujue's stamina points had reached 42%, and he was basically out of danger. Seeing this, he simply raised his head and swallowed the remaining beef jerky in one gulp. Then, he got up and walked to the kitchen. He threw the bag into the trash can, washed his hands, and dried them with a towel. Then, he went to the bookshelf and picked a book. It was a book about botany that he rarely read. As expected, Feng Bujue flipped to the second half of the book, but the words that appeared in front of him were all blurry and indistinct. He flipped the book to the front again. The table of contents was normal, and he could see everything clearly. But when he flipped to the official chapters, he could only see bits and pieces of information, and most of it was blurry. Things that I have completely forgotten or information that I have not read before cannot be reconstructed. Feng Bujue closed the book and turned back to look at the complete Detective Sherlock Holmes that was placed on a coffee table. I can remember the content of Sherlock Holmes, and it was very detailed, so the whole book can be reconstructed. He lowered his head and read. Since it is information that I already know, then the game prompt for me to look at the word from 599 to 602 is not for me to read the content of the book, but he returned to the sofa and flipped open the thick book again. While I was searching the house, I treated my own home as an unfamiliar environment, and that was how I made the breakthrough. So now, I shouldn't treat this book as a detective novel that I've read before. Instead, I should treat it as a pure game clue. After changing his train of thought, Feng Bujue picked up the book. He picked up pages 599 to 600 and shone the flashlight on them. The words don't seem to have changed after the light shone on them. He tried to turn the book upside down and turn it to the side, but he could not see anything different. Soaking it in water or roasting it in fire is an irreversible test, he mumbled. The paper is not that thick, so the chance of there being a hidden layer in the middle is not high. Once a puzzle player reached a dead end, it was best to take a step back to see if there was any information that he had missed or to find a new path. Therefore, Feng Bujue listed out the items that he had obtained after entering the scenario but had not used them. The items that I obtained in the testing room and have not used are a foldable knife, a lighter, a Nokia, and a match. With that in mind, he took out the match and placed it before his eyes. The combination of a Nokia and a knife can be used to start fire. Using the phone's lithium battery can be used to start fire. But on a superficial level, the two items that have the same function are undoubtedly the lighter and the match. With that in mind, Phone Bujua picked up the lighter and tapped on its gear. A small flame sprang up. It's still working. That was within his expectations because he had taken the item out of his inventory in the bathroom. Even if it had malfunctioned due to being soaked in water earlier, there was no such problem now. In this room, there are many ways to start a fire. There is a gas stove and so many wires. I can use the food in the fridge to create a fire. Phone Bujua thought. Since the lighter is here, it has lost its uniqueness. But what about matches? His eyes rested on the matches again. Apart from lighting a fire, it seems to have something to do with the match puzzle. The puzzle he was referring to was something like moving a matchstick in a graph to make both sides of an equation hold. It doesn't seem to have anything to do with the puzzle before me. He was about to put down the match when he suddenly thought of something. Wait a minute, this is the match that the little match girl had. Could it be? As we all know, in that fairy tale, whenever the little girl lit a match, she could combine it with the scenery around her and see a beautiful illusion. A new hypothesis sprouted in Phone Bujua's mind. He immediately got up and turned off the lights in the living room. He returned to the sofa and sat down. He opened the book to page 600 and opened it. He took a deep breath and held the match in his hand. I hope it won't go to waste. Click. Phone Bujua drew the match on the rough surface of the coffee table and lit the plot item. The moment the fire lit up, a three-dimensional image immediately appeared on the open page of the book. Phone Bujua, on the other hand, was like a spectator who was in the scene. In his ears, the sound of the waterfall echoed. Chapter 323. The Reichenbach waterfall was located in the mountains of Meiningen, Switzerland. On both sides of the waterfall, there were black coal-like rocks. At the mouth of the valley, there was a huge gap where the river flowed into. The gap below gradually narrowed, and the milky white, boiling water flowed into the bottomless ravine, splashing a torrent of water down the gap. The continuous green waves were like thunder, and the thick, swaying curtain of water made a sound for a long time. The torrent poured into the bottomless abyss, and the water splashed high, like smoke rising from a house on fire. The turbulence and noise made people dizzy. The waves that slapped against the black rocks also let out rumbling sounds that sounded like angry roars. Phone Bujua always felt that this was a very ominous place. In the real world, it was here that Conan Doyle had the idea of killing Holmes. And in the virtual world, a criminal tycoon and the god of detectives had perished together. Of course, Sherlock Holmes came back from the dead under the author's pen, but Professor Moriarty was buried here forever. What is this for me to see? Phone Bujua stared at the water of the waterfall, overlooking the dark abyss, as if he was about to be sucked in. The match burned for a much longer time than he had imagined. If the little match girl really had a box of matches like this, she probably wouldn't have frozen to death and would have been able to hold on for the night. Oh, they're coming. In Phone Bujua's sight, two figures walked up the narrow path. One of them was the famous detective Sherlock Holmes. He was nearly 9 meters tall, and his body was slightly thin. His face was blurred, and it was difficult to see his specific appearance. But Phone Bujua was still very sure that this was Holmes because the man next to him was obviously over 50 years old. Holmes was set to be born in 1854. In the last case, he was around 40 years old. And the man in his 50s was naturally Professor Moriarty. The two of them talked on the narrow path, and the content of the conversation was completely covered by the sound of the waterfall. Judging from the way the two of them talked, they seemed to be very polite. Phone Bujua truly admired the magnanimity of these two men. After all, Holmes was well aware of Moriarty's intentions, and he also understood that he would soon be facing a battle of life and death. Moriarty, on the other hand, was able to maintain his composure in the face of an opponent who had destroyed everything he had. This was also admirable. The conversation went on for a few minutes. Then, with Moriarty's consent, Holmes took out a piece of paper from his pocket and began to write on it. This was his last words to Watson. It was not long before Holmes had finished his note, and he left the letter, the case, and the cane on the narrow path. Then, the two continued to walk forward. When Fong Bujue was reading this when he was young, he could read between the lines that the professor was armed. When the original article described Moriarty's attack on Holmes, it said, "He did not pull out a weapon, but he suddenly charged at me. He definitely had a pistol in his pocket. Otherwise, Holmes would not have walked toward the waterfall." But Mr. Conan Doyle did not write that Moriarty drew his gun. From this, it was clear that he had a good grasp of the character's personality. If this scene was an American detective movie in the 1980s, it would basically be a foul-mouthed villain pointing a gun at a tough guy, protagonist walking down a narrow path. The villain had already drawn his gun, but he still had to push and kick the protagonist to walk forward obediently. But the two characters in this book would never have lost their composure like this. As two wise and cultured gentlemen, there was no need for them to say anything, and there was no need for them to be at daggers drawn. Since I know you have a gun in your pocket, and you know you have a gun in your pocket, let's talk calmly and politely, and then let's do what needs to be done. So far, it's no different from what was described in the book. Fong Buju muttered as he watched the CG-like scene. But according to the style of this script, there are bound to be situations that contradict the original. His deduction was accurate. Not long after, Holmes and Moriarty came to the end of the narrow path, and the latter suddenly launched an attack. Moriarty's eyes were burning with hatred and anger. The criminal empire he had run for years was destroyed by Scotland Yard, and the detective in front of him was responsible for all of it. Holmes had already expected this development, and he immediately used his skillful fighting skills to contend with his opponent. This fight was not very interesting to watch. There were no beautiful punches and kicks like in wuxia movies, nor were there bullet times and dazzling special effects like in postmodern movies. Most of the time, these two were just wrestling with their strength. But this kind of fight was the most realistic. This was how it was in real life. When people fought, knowing how to wrestle was more practical than anything else. Ugh! With a low roar, Professor Moriarty fell into the waterfall, and Sherlock Holmes fell down with him. What the F***? Fong Bujue could not help but curse. At the same time, the flame on the match finally burned Fong Bujue's finger. The slight burning pain brought him back to reality, and the illusion in front of him disappeared. In the dark living room, a wisp of white smoke rose, announcing that the match had lost its effect. Fong Bujue threw the small piece of remaining match on a coffee table and got up to turn on the light. "He's dead." Fong Bujue sat back on the sofa and frowned. "Yes, he's dead." Realization dawned on Brother Jew. When he was writing the last case, Conan Doyle did intend to end Sherlock Holmes' story, and the ending was a mutual destruction. The information in his mind quickly gathered like a whirlpool. In that virtual world, before The Return of Sherlock was written, Holmes was a dead man buried in the waterfall with Moriarty. Unreasonable things may not always be obvious. The fourth sentence flashed across his mind. The narration on pages 599 to 602 was written by the author a few years later to bring the detective back from the dead. Fong Bujue looked at the book again. There was no climbing up the cliff, no attackers, no three people. Not a single person. As he spoke, he tore the two pieces of paper from the book. "This is what you want to tell me, right? Moriarty." "No, what I want to tell you is much more than that." A deep, mysterious voice replied. The voice was like a spell. In the next second, the scenery in front of Fong Bujue changed abruptly. He seemed to wake up from a dream and was in another place. "Oh, am I the first one?" Fong Bujue took a closer look and realized that he was inside a room that was white on all six sides, and the walls shone with a suitable amount of white light. In front of him was a wooden round table about 4 meters in diameter. There were 6 chairs around it. He was sitting on one of the chairs. Moriarty was sitting on the opposite side of the table. "You might be the last one," Moriarty replied. His appearance was similar to the one in the illusion earlier. At that moment, His face was clearly displayed before Feng Bujue's eyes. The professor looked to be in his 50s. There were many wrinkles on his face. Between his brows, other than the aura of a scholar, there was something else. It was a cold, evil, and cruel quality. You mean, they will die in their own memories? Feng Bujue asked. Not necessarily. I am only saying it is possible, Moriarty replied. His tone was calm and reserved. They're all smart people, but you stand out from the rest. I believe you've asked the magic mirror before who is the most handsome person in the world, Feng Bujue replied with a smile. Sigh, I am not worthy of it. See, this is one of the interesting things about you. Moriarty smiled, but there was no mirth in his eyes. The pair of gray eyes was like a beast staring at its prey. They stared directly into Feng Bujue's eyes, and it felt like they could pierce through one's soul. You are very good at using this unique sense of humor to test others. At the same time, it is also a form of protection for yourself. It can hide your true thoughts. Oh, is that your judgment? Feng Bujue asked. Have you considered the other two hypotheses? He raised two fingers and said, First, I am just a talker. Second, I'm a madman. Moriarty sneered. He leaned forward and placed his elbows on the table. He crossed his fingers and placed them before his chin. Do you think I am a madman? You? Ha! Feng Bujue replied with a smile. He raised both of his hands and extended one finger each. This is madness, and this is you. As he spoke, he opened his arms and extended the distance between his two fingers. You and madness are like two ends of a straight line, as far as you can go. From how I see it, you are so rational that it is boring. Then, Moriarty continued, How high do you think the success rate of acting crazy before me is? Feng Bujue shrugged. It's not like I have to pay to try. The two looked at each other across the table and started to laugh for no reason. They laughed louder and louder like two mental patients. It was Moriarty who stopped laughing first. Welcome to the Detective Club, Feng Bujue. Can you invite your partner out now? Feng Bujue raised his right palm and signaled at the chair next to Moriarty. A puff of white smoke floated up. I am here, another voice said. A lanky man holding a pipe walked out from Feng Bujue's blind spot. He puffed out smoke rings and walked lazily out from behind Feng Bujue. Chapter 3:24. After 1 hour of puzzle solving, weighty words finally escaped from his memory space. The white light that lit up around him announced the change in the environment. Just as he was getting used to the light in front of him, Xiaofeng's voice sounded beside him. Now everyone is here. Weighty words turned to look and was shocked. At that moment, there was a dagger stuck into Autumn Wind's chest. His body was pinned to the chair by the dagger, and the wound was still bleeding. Don't panic, he's fine. Temporarily, his life is not in danger. Hong Hu's tone was as calm as ever. Hearing that, weighty words turned to look to the other side. Hong Hu was not injured by the dagger, but his whole head was trapped inside a small metal cage. It was like he was wearing a helmet that could not be removed. The cage was rectangular and was only slightly bigger than Hong Hu's head. There was a round hole at the bottom of the cage, and it fit perfectly around his neck. To be honest, this style was a bit comical despite its novelty. What is this? Weighty words soon saw the situation before him. He realized that he was sitting at a round table, and there were many strange cards on the table. Around the table, there were 6 chairs. Other than the 4 players, there were 2 unfamiliar characters. The 2 NPCs, or perhaps the boss, looked calm and unharmed. But on the player's side, it was a different story. It's time for the quest to be updated, right? This was Feng Bujue. Brother Ju's current situation was not looking good either. His cheeks had been cut, and there was a wound on both sides of his lips. It was as if there was a smile on his face that would never disappear. You're trying to imitate Joker, aren't you? Weighty words could not help but say. It was not unreasonable for him to say the word imitation, because Feng Bujue was really holding a bloody foldable knife in his hand. It looked like the smiling face had been cut by himself. Humph. Just take it that way, Feng Bujue replied with a chuckle. Current quest completed. Main quest updated, the system said. In the quest tab of the 4 players, all surviving players enter the detective club. This line was finally hooked. As for escape from memory space and return to the 7th floor of the test building. Although every player had this quest, it wasn't a shared quest. Instead, it was 4 identical individual quests. Therefore, the players completed them separately. Oh, is that so? Feng Bujue saw the new quest that appeared in the quest tab. Defeat Sherlock Holmes and Moriarty in the game of the Round Table. And he commented with a smile, "This is quite difficult. Why do you look so happy when you say it's difficult?" Qiu Feng said in a gloomy tone. "Huh, aren't you having fun too?" Feng Bujue laughed. Qiu Feng said, "What do you mean by happy? I still have the bleeding effect on me." Feng Bujue shrugged. "Huh." In the end, Hong, who is the most comfortable, ambitionist, pulled a long face through the bars. "I feel like I've already lost something very important to me by wearing this iron cage on my head." Weighty Words had a confused look on his face. He scratched his head and asked, "What are you guys doing?" "We'll talk about that later." Feng Bujue said, "Why don't you tell us something that you haven't encountered in the memory space?" "Haven't encountered?" Weighty Words' eyes were shining, and he wondered if this was a hint from Brother Feng. When he was solving the puzzle in the memory space, Weighty Words did run into a few situations that were very similar to what the messages were referring to. If there were any messages that he had not encountered, there should be 2 of them left. Holmes took a puff from the pipe and used his British accent to say, "I believe you are like these gentlemen and remember the content of the 5 messages clearly. So, please say one of them so that the game can continue. But do not tell us the messages that you've encountered because the hint of those sentences has already been used, and they cannot be used as a condition to join the game," Moriarty said. Weighty Words looked left and right, and many thoughts crossed his mind. He saw that his teammates were all sitting quietly in their seats. Even though someone had a sword in his chest, no one showed any sign of violence. This showed that the situation before them was not something that could be solved through violence. When you think you've gotten what you want, you've actually lost more, Weighty Words said. In the memory space, he had not experienced a scenario that matched the meaning of this message. Just as he finished, a card on the table started to move even though no one was touching it. It slowly moved to Weighty Words' side. Foo-foo. Holmes blew out a puff of smoke. "Flip it over, Mr. Words." Since the man said flip it over, it meant that the back of the card was facing up. Weighty Words lowered his eyes to look at the card. Other than the endless blue pattern on the back, there was a word printed on it. Hint. Weighty Words lifted his head to look at his teammates. Hong Hu and Xiu Feng had a serious expression on their faces, but Feng Bujue had a smile on his face. If I'm not mistaken, Weighty Words' hand was already on the card, but he did not flip it open. Instead, he looked at the 2 bosses and said, "The sentence that Brother Feng chose is to welcome the tragedy with a smile, to face all the misfortune with 100 times the courage." And Hong Hu's choice is the place where there is no place in the world that can compare to his own home. "Huh, correct speculation," Holmes replied with a smile. "That's right. The card will produce the corresponding effect according to the content of the hint." Weighty Words laughed coldly and turned to Qiu Feng. "Qiu Feng, which sentence did you say?" "I can't guess." "A sincere act of kindness, not asking for anything in return," Qiu Feng replied listlessly. "Humph," Weighty Words grumbled. "Looks like no matter what sentence you say, it will not end well." He turned to face Moriarty and Holmes. "Then what if I don't flip this card?" "What else?" Feng Bujue replied on their behalf. "The game will stop at your turn and cannot continue. Then everyone will drag it out until you are judged as AFKing by the system, or everyone disconnect from the game due to excessive gaming time." Qiu Feng added, "By the way, I can't use the things in my inventory anymore. If you drag this on for another hour or so, I might bleed to death." Hong Hu added, "And if you wish to solve the problem with the professor and the detective, you'd better try to remember the wall of light that sealed the door to the 1st floor. Guess whose work that is?" Weighty Words laughed drily and shook his head. "Fine, I'll flip it then." At most, I'll get hurt. He grumbled and flipped the card over. Chapter 325. 20 minutes earlier, Holmes walked past Fong Bujue and sat down in the chair next to the professor. He placed his cigarette box on the table. How did you deduce that the professor has a partner? Fong Bujue smiled. There are 6 seats here, aren't there? Just based on that? Moriarty asked. Isn't that enough? Fong Bujue leaned back in his chair and spread his hands. Your pursuit of order and precision has become instinct. How can there be meaningless things in your inner world? He tapped the table twice with his finger. Theoretically speaking, if all 4 of us travelers from another world are here, including you, there are only 5 of us. So why is there a 6th chair? Simple, because there is another person. Then how do you know that the person who comes to the table must be the professor's partner and not another guest? Holmes asked again. Because I guess that the person who came was you, Fong Bujue replied. Fuh. Holmes blew out a smoke ring. You learn from the magic mirror that the professor is the boss here. After seeing the image, you deduce that the professor and I are in this space. He paused. I can understand that, but why do you think the professor and I are partners? He's right, Moriarty said. Usually, people think that we are sworn enemies. Both of you are dead, Fong Bujue said. What do you mean by sworn enemies? Oh, go on, Holmes said with a smile. The relationship of old enemies is built on the basis of mutual respect and acknowledgement. Therefore, sworn enemies are something that can only be found by chance. Fong Bujue said, comparatively speaking, the relationship of friends is easier to manage. You just need to understand each other and tolerate each other's bad habits. Fong Bujue looked at the two of them. You two are sworn enemies, not enemies. Of course, there is indeed hatred between the two of you, but after you die, it no longer exists. Birds of a feather flock together in this world. Putting aside your identities as a criminal consultant and a consulting detective, you are 2 very similar people. If conditions permit, the possibility of you colluding with each other is very high. Moriarty's expression did not change. He said coldly, if your choice of words could be a little more elegant, I would not be able to resist clapping for you. Fong Bujue pursed his lips, refusing to comment. Then, how did you deny the existence of the brain dimension? Holmes asked again. The magic mirror told me. Fong Bujue replied. Before I asked the second question, the magic mirror couldn't wait to ask me if the second question was who are the spiritual hosts of these 2 spaces? Fong Bujue smiled. The moment he said that, there was no need for me to ask. Your brain, your rule. Fong Bujue looked at the professor and said, obviously, in the world you constructed, I am limited. He was referring to the fact that he could not use his inventory. None of the things I brought into this world can be used. As he spoke, he took out a folding knife from his pocket and placed it in front of him. And when I returned to my own memory, not only could I use the things I already had, but I could also use the things I got from you. I think this is because the things I got in this world have also become part of my memory. As for the spatial transfer between these 2 worlds, it should have nothing to do with actual physical phenomena. Otherwise, the things in my pocket would have been lost in the rapid flow of the waterfall. Fong Bujue put his hands behind his head. In my memory, those things are wet only because of the water in the bathtub. Not bad, Holmes said, but it is not completely accurate. I would like to hear more, Fong Bujue said. Holmes replied, let the professor tell you that. Moriarty looked straight at Fong Bujue and said in a deep voice, this is not my own mental world, but a space composed of collective wills. He adjusted his collar. Mr. Holmes and I are just stronger than the other wills here, so we have taken the lead and become the dominators of this space. I see, Fong Bujue said. Then I wonder if I can make a hypothesis. If I can be stronger than the 2 of you mentally, even if it's just for a few seconds, I will become the dominator here? Yes, Moriarty replied in a gloomy tone. You could try it at any time. He sneered. As long as you master the rules of this space and can surpass me in terms of will, then you can make me pop like a balloon with a snap of your fingers. Then what is the rule of this space? Fong Bujue asked. That will be up to you to figure out, Moriarty replied. While they were talking, a figure suddenly appeared on the chair next to Feng Bujue. It was none other than Hong Hu. This is Hong Hu saw the personal mission that was ticked off and understood immediately. This is the 7th floor? Welcome to the detective club, Feng Bujue said to Hong Hu before the professor could say anything. Brother Feng. Hong Hu looked around. Who are these two? Oh, you don't know? Feng Bujue pondered. So, the memory space that we experience is different. Hearing that, Hong Hu asked, Brother Feng, did you not meet Peter Pan? I ran into things like magic mirrors and succubi, Feng Bujue said. Hong Hu sighed. Sigh. I had a conversation with a balding uncle who called himself Peter Pan about life for half an hour. Huh? Feng Bujue was also stunned. He said that he left Neverland and chose to grow up. He found a job, got married, had a child, paid his mortgage, paid his insurance. Then he talked about the financial crisis and the rise of oil prices. Hong Hu's eyes were filled with fear. For some reason, the more I listened, the more hopeless I felt. Oh, you sure are unlucky. Feng Bujue said. I'm much better. First, it was the magic mirror. It told me that I was the most handsome person in the world. Then I killed Cinderella's stepmother and the spirits of the 2 sisters. Finally, I had sex with a succubus. After hearing that, Hong Hu felt like he had been stabbed in the back. Actually, I was just making it up. I just wanted to see your reaction. Feng Bujue laughed. I'm warning you. Don't add me as a friend after the scenario ends, Hong Hu said coldly and expressionlessly. Hello, both of you. Moriarty cleared his throat. Feng Bujue seemed to have just remembered the existence of the 2 bosses. Oh, right, I forgot to introduce them. He turned to Hong Hu. This is Professor James Moriarty. He gestured with his hand. The one smoking the pipe next to him is Mr. Sherlock Holmes. Oh, nice to meet you. Hong Hu really wanted to walk over and shake their hands. Don't move. The moment Holmes said this, he reached out and flicked his pipe. His careless action caused the ambitionist to be pushed back into his seat by an invisible force. I'm not done yet. Feng Bujue continued. The professor is the boss here, and Mr. Holmes is his partner. Hong Hu's brain seemed to short-circuit for a few seconds before he finally gave the answer. Is that so? Yes, that's right, Feng Bujue said. Everyone, since 4 of us have taken our seats, Moriarty said. Let the game begin. What game? Hong Hu asked. It's a game that the professor and I came up with together. It's a pastime for the detective club, Holmes said. I wish to ask, how many members are there in your club? Feng Bujue asked. Currently, there are only the 2 of us, Moriarty replied. Don't tell me the other members have all died in this pastime? Feng Bujue asked. Moriarty laughed. Words were not needed. Feng Bujue, you arrived earlier than Ambitionist, so you should make the first move, Holmes said. At the same time, the professor snapped his fingers, and a stack of neatly stacked cards appeared on the table. Wow, that's a good thing, Feng Bujue said sarcastically. This game requires the participation of at least 2 people who know the truth, and on this table, the ones who know the truth are me and Holmes, Moriarty explained. In the pile of cards in front of you, there are 4 types of cards. Hint, question, conjecture, and presumption. The newcomers will need to enter the game with hint. So I have to draw a hint card now? Feng Bujue asked. No, you don't need to use your own hands to choose the card. As Moriarty spoke, the card on the table spread out on their own and covered the entire table. Phew, Holmes continued. The hint cards have been given to you. There are 5 of them. Once he said that, Feng Bujue and Hong Hu understood instantly that he was referring to the 5 messages that they had received earlier. When you were moving around in the memory space, you should have encountered situations that matched these hints, Holmes said. Every time you encounter a situation, it means that one of the hints has been used. He paused for 2 seconds before continuing. And for the remaining sentences, each of them means that you have to draw a hint card. Sounds like this card is not a good thing. Feng Bujue did not finish. Moriarty cut him off. Read it out loud, and you'll understand. Drink? Who's afraid of who? Feng Bujue slammed on the table. Use a smile to welcome the tragedy, and use 100 times the courage to face all the misfortune. Once he said that, a hint card automatically moved before him. That's quite high-tech. Brother Bujuev flipped the card over. I've picked it up. What's wrong with it? Moriarty and Holmes did not speak. They either sneered or smoked. Seeing that they did not respond, Fong Bujue's gaze fell on the card. On the front of the card, there was a clown's face printed on it. Almost as soon as their eyes met, the card fell from Fong Bujue's hand, and his hand involuntarily reached for the folding knife on the table. Chapter 3:26. Time returned to the present. Weighty Words flipped the card over and placed it before his eyes. There was a ball of black wool printed on the front of his hint card. Are you planning to use the yarn to wrap me up? Weighty Words said after glancing at the picture. Before he finished, the way Hong Hu, Xiao Feng, and Feng Bujue looked at him changed. What? Weighty Words wanted to ask what was wrong, but before he could ask, he was shocked by what was happening. At that moment, from an outsider's perspective, Weighty Words' hair swelled like dough and soon turned into a large, fluffy afro. Then, this large hair started to rain like a dark cloud. Of course, it was not rain, but long hair that fell like a waterfall. About 30 seconds later, this process finally stopped. Weighty Words' small crew cut seemed to have turned into a large mushroom, and under the mushroom's roof, hair that looked like willows hung. If he stood up, other people would not be able to see his body. From afar, he looked like a black, fluffy jellyfish. When you think you've gotten what you want, you've actually lost even more, Weighty Words repeated. As Weighty Words repeated that, he used his hands to pull back the curtain-like hair to reveal his face. Even though I have recently considered changing the crew cut in the game to a different hairstyle. In the new patch for Thriller Paradise announced on Dream Inc.'s official website, there's a new hairstyle modification service that will be available soon, but it will definitely not be like this. When you think you've won the title of the king of haircuts and haircuts, you've already lost your dignity and taste. Feng Bujue mocked coldly. Ha! Hearing that, Xiao Feng laughed. But several seconds later, the spot where the sword pierced his chest started to bleed again. Cough! No, don't make me laugh, or else I won't last an hour. Ambitionist said calmly. Compared to the rest of us, you're still considered okay. As he said that, he poked his finger through the iron bars before his face and pushed up his glasses out of habit. I'd rather have a cage over my head. Weighty Words pushed the hair away from his face to the back of his shoulders, or else he would not be able to see anything. Everyone, let us continue. Mr. Yu, you came at the right time. Before you appeared, your 3 companions had already completed their rounds. His tone was still calm. At this moment, I believe that all of you have seen how this game is played. We've seen the effects of the card, but what about the rules of the game? Feng Bujue asked. We can't keep playing under your command. Moriarty turned his head and exchanged glances with Holmes. Then he said to the players, language is a form of power. He raised an arm and made an introductory gesture. Please remember this, because in this space, or in this roundtable game, this is the most basic part. He used his hand to point at the cards on the table. In the basic rules of this game, every player must use the 4 types of cards: hint, question, guess, and deduce. His eyes scanned the players' faces. But there is a problem. At this table, only Mr. Holmes and I know the truth. Therefore, as players who do not know the truth, there is no reason for you to choose the hint. So, the rule states that we have to use hint to enter the game. Hong Hu asked. Yes, Moriarty replied. We've left those suggestive words all over the place, so that when you climb the stairs, you can see with your own eyes the influence of these few sentences on the other characters in this space. Can I understand it this way? In this world, language is a form of power, and hint is a skill with negative attributes? Autumn Wind asked. Not exactly, Holmes interjected, but it's very close. On this table, there is no such thing as positive or negative. The precondition for determining the effect of the card is whether the words spoken have any value. Moriarty continued. Now is my turn. Let me give you a hint and demonstrate. He paused for a moment and said loudly, hint, There are no lies in this world. After that, a hint card moved in front of the professor. Moriarty flipped the card open and showed it to everyone. The front of the card was blank. Look, there is no punishment. About 5 seconds later, Fong Bujua let out a chilling laugh from his cheeks. Humph, I get it now. He was still toying with the knife in his hand and looked relaxed. You are an insider. What you are saying now can help us get closer to the truth, so your hint is valuable. He paused for a second before continuing. And us who do not know the truth have only spoken the language that you have left for us. Even though the nature of the words is indeed hint on this table, it is meaningless. Not bad. Looks like you've gotten the hang of it, Moriarty replied with a smile. Weighty Words thought about it and concluded. Then, in this game, for those who do not know the truth, choosing hint will result in punishment because those who know the truth do not need our hint. But for those who know the truth, assumption is something that cannot be touched because you have known the truth from the beginning, so there is nothing to be assumed. But the problem is Hong, who cut him off. Every player has to use all 4 types of cards, right? He tossed a sharp gaze at Moriarty. Yes, Moriarty replied matter-of-factly. Don't worry, Mr. Holmes and I are not the kind of people who would cheat. For those who do not know the truth, the first sentence that you say when you enter the game will be taken as a hint. He blew out a puff of smoke. But those who know the truth do not have this restriction. They can start with any type of card. He flicked the ash on the cigarette. But whether it is those who know the truth or not, in the first 4 rounds of the game, they're not allowed to choose the same card. In other words, every player has to choose all 4 types of cards in the first 4 rounds, Moriarty said. Does that mean, from the 5th round onwards, we can choose the same card repeatedly? Hong Hu asked. Moriarty scoffed. Yes, from the 5th round onwards, you can choose ask every round. He pointed out what Hong Hu was thinking. Chapter 327. Let me continue, said Holmes. He put down his pipe and looked at the table. It is presumed that Professor Moriarty is mentally retarded. His words gave the 4 players the misconception that they were hearing things. Only Professor Moriarty himself was still as calm as an ancient well. Nice try, Moriarty said casually. Holmes smiled and shrugged. He mimicked Fong Bujue's tone and said, It doesn't cost me anything to try. The players had no idea what these 2 guys were up to. However, the cards on the table moved as expected. A card with the word presumed printed on the back was moved in front of Holmes. The great detective didn't pick up the card. Instead, he turned the card over on the table to reveal the picture on the front. On the card was a picture of a bomb. It was the black ball bomb that often appeared in cartoons. Holmes glanced at the card, then stood up and took a few steps back to put some distance between himself and the table. He began to fumble in his pockets. When he touched the left pocket of his coat, his expression changed slightly. Oh, here it is, he said. He took out a black ball bomb that was slightly bigger than an orange from the pocket. The shape of the bomb was exactly the same as the one on the card, and the fuse was lit. The moment it was taken out of the pocket, the fuse was almost burnt out. Boom! Before the 4 players could react, the explosion happened. The 3 of them were stunned. Fong Bujue, on the other hand, had a smile on his face. The power of the bomb was average. It only affected an area of about a meter in radius. A ball of thick black smoke enveloped Holmes' upper body and blocked everyone's view. Moriarty sat there as steadily as a mountain. He didn't even intend to look back. Not long after, the black smoke dissipated, and Holmes stood there unscathed. He patted the dust off his body and strode back to the table. He picked up his pipe and said, Gentlemen, please continue. Hey, what do you mean? Is the punishment you received just a smokescreen? Xiao Feng said unhappily. No, it was a real explosion, Holmes replied. If I had stayed at the table, it would have affected everyone. If it's not a trick, it means that they are very powerful in this space. The punishment will not harm them, Hong Hu said. Yes. Holmes bit his pipe and nodded slightly. I'm sorry, Weighty Words said. I suddenly remembered that there is a crucial question that you have not explained. He looked at Moriarty and Holmes. How is the winner decided in this game? Moriarty replied. As long as any one of you can deduce the truth, you win. And if all four of us die before we find out the truth, it will be the victory of insiders. Fong Bujue continued the professor's words to weighty words. Good that you understand. It's your turn now. Moriarty looked at Fong Bujue. Since the round where the insiders enter the game is considered a hint, Fong Bujue put down the knife and sat forward. Then from this round onwards, before I say words, I have to declare whether this is a question, speculation, or deduction, right? Yes, Moriarty replied. By the way, Fong Bujue said, if I say hint again, what will happen? Before the fifth round, your repeated declaration will be considered invalid, Moriarty replied. Your turn will continue until you announce a valid choice. Moriarty replied. Your turn will continue until you announce a valid choice. Oh, there's one more thing. Fong Bujue pointed at the table. Reach out to flip through these unopened cards, or tear them apart, or destroy them. Death is all. Holmes interrupted him in a leisurely tone. When Fong Bujue heard that, he shook his head and dawdled for a while. Suddenly, he slammed the table and shouted, Ask. If you want to ask, just ask. Why are you so surprised? Swan said, That's right. I have a weak heart. Autumn Wind pointed at the hilt of the sword in his chest. Fong Bujue ignored them and threw out his own question. What is the law of this dimension? Brother Jew's question was basically equivalent to say it and let me win. He also knew that things would not be that simple. He was just giving it a try to pave the way for his teammate's turn. Sure enough, after he asked the question, none of the cards on the table moved. The professor explained in a timely manner. When you ask a question, the player on the other side can choose to answer or not answer. Holmes continued. If we choose not to answer, you will be exempted from punishment once. Moriarty said. And if we answer this question, the round table will begin to judge. He paused for a second. If the questioner himself can gain some useful information from our answers, then this inquiry will be deemed valuable. Otherwise, it will be a meaningless question, and the questioner will be punished. Holmes took another puff of his cigarette while the professor was talking. Then he added, Also, you can't ask the same question twice. You can't change the wording or the meaning, or you will be punished. Moriarty shrugged. As for your question now, we will naturally not answer. After he said that, a card on the table with the word question on the back flipped over on its own and moved in front of Fong Bujue. There was no picture on the front of the card, only the word exemption written in black and white. Hey. Chiu Fong could not help but interrupt. If you keep choosing not to answer when all the meaningful questions are asked, won't the inquiry be useless to us? His question was also what the other players were thinking. So, you'd better use the question to gain immunity before all the meaningful questions are asked, Moriarty said. You can also try to set up a trap and use seemingly meaningless questions to lure us into revealing useful information, Holmes suggested with a fearless attitude. He smiled. Don't worry about us lying. As long as we choose to answer, we have to tell the truth. Then, before I choose the card, can the two of you share your speculation and presumption? Hong Hu asked. Speculation is to propose a hypothesis, Holmes replied. If the content of the conjecture has nothing to do with unraveling the truth, the conjecture will draw a penalty card directly. He paused. And a reasonable and constructive conjecture will draw a white card after flipping it over. At this time, the professor and I will have to respond to your speculation and answer whether you are right, wrong, or not accurate. Presumption is to state a conclusion, and the round table will judge whether it is correct or not. If you are right, you will get a white card, and if you are wrong, you will be punished with death, Moriarty added. Of course, Holmes was punished only because his conclusion had nothing to do with the truth. Just as you predicted earlier, the hints from those who do not know the truth are meaningless, and those who do know can only come up with some irrelevant or wrong conclusions when they make a presumption. After this explanation, the room fell into silence. The four players were trying their best to think quickly. They were well aware of how grim the situation was. The complexity and difficulty of this round table game was something they had not encountered before, and the two opponents they were playing against were godlike sages, and they were set to be invincible in the scenario. If they wanted to win, they had to use language to gain enough information within the time limit and the rules to deduce the truth or the rules hidden in this space. I will ask. Hong, who did not think for too long. He knew that time was precious. For this round, he decided to secure an exemption card first. His teammates understood what he meant. Because Autumn Wind was bleeding, wasting time might mean losing a member. And with every member lost, there would be one less round for the unknowing. Question, Mr. Holmes. What is the reason why you were not killed by the explosion earlier? Hong, who, the strategist, lived up to his name. He would definitely be able to get an exemption card with this question. Because the power of these two bosses was closely related to the rules of this space, this question was not going to be answered. Ah, this is so delightful. Holmes turned to Moriarty and said, Professor, the guests you have invited today are really interesting. He took a puff from his pipe and pointed it in the direction of Swan. Take this one, for example. Not only is she intelligent, but she also has a unique ability to observe and reason. Yes, another example is that kid, Moriarty replied in a tepid tone. His eyes turned to Feng Bujue. He is very similar to you. His mind is sharp and logical, but he is extremely conceited, casual, and unrestrained. Are you going to answer or not? Ambitionist urged. He did not think that it was an honor to be praised by two virtual game characters. He only knew that these two bosses would waste a certain amount of time by looking around and talking about him. Hey, don't be so hasty. At this moment, Chiu Feng interrupted. Next, they will most likely praise me in weighty words. Let them finish. Brother Autumn Wind, you really don't know what's good for you. Weighty words flipped his hair. If not for the sword in your chest, we wouldn't have needed to race against time. Ha ha! Autumn Wind could not help but laugh. Don't talk to me. I can't stand seeing you like this. Holmes turned around and looked at Chiu Feng, who was sitting next to him. Looks like they're worried about this. As he spoke, he raised his hand and moved his fingers. Suddenly, the sword in Autumn Wind's chest flew out with a hiss. It floated in the air for 2 seconds before falling to the ground. Autumn Wind reacted quickly and quickly pressed on his wound. He opened the menu and observed for a minute. He realized that even though the bleeding status was still there, the loss of life points had stopped. It looked like as long as he did not let go, the bleeding would stop. Moriarty glanced at Holmes. Is this necessary? He asked. Sherlock Holmes replied with a smile. A panicked opponent will make the game lose the fun it should have. Humph! Moriarty scoffed and looked at the players. Everyone, you heard him. Please take your time to think about it. Chapter 328. After saying that, Moriarty paused for 2 seconds before continuing. Oh, with regards to your question this time. He looked at Hong Hu and said, Obviously, we are not going to answer it. When he made that announcement, one of the question cards on the table automatically flipped over and moved to face Hong Hu. On the front of the card, the word exemption was written. From that moment on, it was Autumn Wind's turn. Let me think about it, Autumn Wind said. Weighty words reminded him from the other end of the table. For this round, it's best to choose question and draw an exemption card first. Hong Hu agreed with weighty words. He added, that's right. Currently, we still have too little information. Speculation is not safe, and speculation might lead to punishment. Right then, Moriarty said, Allow me to explain. In terms of severity, the punishment for suggestion is between light to medium. And if you are punished for questioning and speculation, the damage will be medium to serious. However, the presumptive punishment is between severe and fatal. Follow the normal strategy, Holmes added. After those who do not know the truth enter the game with suggestion, they should choose to ask to gain immunity in the second round. And in the third round, they should try to speculate. Even if the speculation is wrong, they can use their immunity to offset the punishment. He took another puff from the cigarette. Phew! Of course, if you have enough confidence in your speculation, you can choose to speculate in the third round. But if your speculation is not even close to the truth, then your immunity will be used up by your speculation. In the fourth round, You will have to make a presumption without any safety measures. Hey, but we are opponents, Autumn Wind said. Why are the two of you helping us with the analysis? What is the meaning of this? What I'm talking about is the most basic strategy, Holmes replied. I believe that any one of you, after giving it some thought, would do the same, hint, question, inference, and conjecture, to deal with the first 4 rounds. If you think the kind advice given by me and Holmes is misleading, there is no need to follow our advice, Moriarty said. They are right. Weighty words turned to Autumn Wind. Reaching the 5th round alive is our primary goal, and the strategy proposed by Mr. Holmes is the most correct and the safest. Hong, who interrupted, they're just talking about a strategy that we could have thought of in the first place, and it's very likely that we'll implement it. It's not much help. He adjusted his glasses. If you don't do it because of reverse psychology, you'll fall into their trap. Chiu Feng pondered for a moment and then said, I'd like to ask. He looked at the professor and Holmes. Is there any other way to end this game other than the death of all those who don't know and the unlocking of the laws of space? The two bosses looked at each other. This time, they chose to answer. Holmes laughed. There is. You could try to kill the professor. Moriarty continued. If you can kill me, this game and this room will disappear. After they finished answering, an inquiry card on the table moved in front of Chiu Feng. Chiu Feng took a deep breath and flipped the card open. The front of the card was blank. You should have more confidence in yourself, young man, Moriarty said. That's not a bad question. Chiu Feng gave a long sigh. Seeing how fearless the two of you are, naturally, I can guess something. He looked at his teammates. Obviously, with our power level, we won't be able to kill the professor, but if we can deduce the laws of this space, we have a chance to do it, Hong Hu added, but since we've already deduced the laws of this space, there's no need for us to take the risk to fight. We can just say it in the form of deduction and win the game. But we can't rule out the possibility that, among the 4 of us, there is someone who knows the truth but refuses to do the deduction and insists on killing the professor, Feng Bujua suddenly said. At this moment, all 3 of his teammates cast meaningful glances at him. What are you doing? Feng Bujua leaned against the chair and opened his arms. Brother Feng, I believe only you would do something like that, weighty words said. Chiu Feng and Hong Hu also nodded to show their agreement. Then, let's stop playing. I'll try to kill the professor first. As Feng Bujua spoke, he took out something from his inventory. What? When the other 3 saw Feng Bujua reach his hand into his inventory, they were shocked. This was because their inventory had returned to its sealed state after they entered this room. Technically speaking, they were all players, and Feng Bujua was no exception. Feng Bujua raised the anti-gravity gun and took out the Nokia phone from his pocket to use as ammunition. He aimed it at Professor Moriarty. Any last words? Professor. Ha ha ha. Holmes laughed at the side and put down his pipe to clap for Feng Bujua. Moriarty was calm. He sat at the table and said calmly, This is hard to believe. We're only halfway through the 2nd round, and you've completed the deduction. If the opponent is too weak or too strong, it will take away the fun of the game, won't it? Feng Bujua said with a smile. What's going on? Hong Hu asked. Brother Feng, where you the law of this space is. Feng Bujua said confidently. What you believe is true is true. What the? How did you come up with that? This time, Chiu Feng could not follow Brother Ju's train of thought. Feng Bujua temporarily put down the gun and said, First, think back to the most basic hint. Language is a kind of power. He used his finger to tap his temple twice. Do you still remember the 5 messages? Without waiting for his teammates to reply, Feng Bujua continued. These messages are not comments after the incident, but the reason behind it. Then the things that we saw when we were climbing the stairs. Hong, who was the first to react. Weighty words added. They were all messages before the actual incident happened. When we jumped into the waterfall on the roof of the 6th floor, those 5 sentences have already become a part of our memory. Therefore, some of the experiences that we have experienced in the memory space have come true to the message that was left behind. Brother Ju's eyes scanned his teammates. If I'm not mistaken, the matches, pointy hats, brooms, and apples that you carried with you were all used to solve the mystery or push forward the plot in your memory space, right? The three nodded slightly. They had indeed used up all the plot items in their own memory space. These few items have two similarities. One, they were all obtained inside the testing building. Two, due to various reasons, they were used before we entered this room. This leads me to a hypothesis. Could it be that someone did not want us to bring these things into this room? Phone Bujua said as he pointed at the phone floating before the catapult. Look, the phone, dagger, and notebook that I obtained outside the testing building. I brought them all in here. This is the final room. Isn't it normal for the plot items to be used before we arrived here? Weighty words said. In Brother Feng, your dagger and notebook are tools and equipment that can be brought out of the scenario. They are not necessary items to push forward the plot. Yes, that explanation does make sense, but Feng Bujua chuckled coldly. Earlier, the professor told me something that bothered me. He said, "This is not a mental world that belongs to me alone, but a space made up by the collective consciousness of others." Combined with the current situation, I understand that the main purpose of the interlude in the memory space is for us to use up the things that we should not have brought in. Why? Xiao Feng asked. Because those few items are the creations of other consciousnesses. Their appearance here will have some kind of influence on the professor, Hong Hu said with some thought. He was following his brother Ju's train of thought. Feng Bujua smiled. Professor, you won't deny that, right? Yes, those items can pose a certain threat to me. Of course, that is if you know how to use them, Moriarty admitted openly. Humph. After all, the items are gone, so it doesn't matter anymore, right? Xiao Feng scoffed. Let's talk about what happened after the roundtable game started. Feng Bujue continued. The four of us entered the game according to the rules, and we were all injured by the power of language. There's not much to say about that. Then, when it was the professor's turn, he immediately exposed his weakness. What did you say? Moriarty's tone changed as he asked with a frown. No. It doesn't matter what I say. The key is what you said, Feng Bujue repeated. The hint, there are no lies in this world. Once that was said, Holmes' hand that held the pipe shook slightly, and he said darkly, Humph. Looks like the professor's hint was too obvious. Moriarty said, Did you guess the truth after hearing that? I did have a hypothesis, but I did not confirm it. Feng Bujue shrugged and sighed. Sigh. Your hint was not punished, so it means that the hint is meaningful. Since you have given me a meaningful hint, I have to dig out something from it to repay you. Believing in the truth means believing in the truth, Xiao Feng said. In other words, as long as you believe in the truth, it will become the truth. Weighty words added. Therefore, there's a chance that there are no lies in this world is true. Combined with Feng Bujue's conclusion, the two naturally understood the reasoning process. The thing that brought me one step closer to the truth was Mr. Holmes' speculation. Feng Bujue continued. He said, Professor Moriarty is a retard. He smiled. I try to think of it from a different perspective. As an insider, during this speculation, naturally, it was impossible for him to come up with the correct conclusion that was related to the truth because that would be admitting defeat. Therefore, Mr. Holmes would have come up with a speculation that had nothing to do with the truth. Actually, at the time, he could have said something like the sky is blue or the snow is white and accepted the punishment. But he did not. As you say, Professor Mr. Holmes, he was exceedingly conceited, careless, and dissolute. Therefore, he said, Professor Moriarty is a retard. Now this is interesting. Why didn't he say the giraffe breathes fire or pigs fly in the sky? Because he knew. If he said something like that, there was a certain chance that these things would come true. Feng Bujue extended his hand to point around them. Both of you are familiar with the rules of this space and have gotten used to it. As long as you can convince your brain that something is true, then it will become true. Just now, Mr. Holmes had only to believe that the bomb could do no harm to him, and he would be unscathed. This kind of self-hypnosis can be mastered through training. It is not that difficult for you. Brother Ju titled his head and told the professor. But Professor Moriarty is a retard is something that Mr. Holmes could not convince himself to believe, so he said it in a joking manner. "You're nice try, and as it costs nothing to try, I understood it immediately." His action appeared to be trying to use words to turn you into a retard. And when he failed, the two of you said those words half-jokingly. At this point, I have basically determined the truth. Then why didn't you just choose the presumption in your turn? Holmes asked. "It's not safe," Feng Bujue replied. "What if I'm wrong?" He wagged his finger. At that time, all I needed was more time to verify my conclusion. So I chose to ask first and asked a foolproof question. When you asked, I hadn't fully explained the rules of the inquiry. To be able to ask such a question, "You are indeed outstanding," Moriarty commented. "You flatter me," Feng Bujue replied. "In short, I know very well that to verify my conclusion, I don't necessarily have to do it in the round table game. I can do it while sitting in my seat." Ambitionist looked at Feng Bujue with disbelief. "In such a short amount of time, you have mastered the method to control the rules without using language. That is indeed difficult, but it is not impossible," Feng Bujue said. I silently gave myself a psychological suggestion, telling myself that I have two tongues. Including Moriarty, the expression of everyone at the table changed. "And it worked," Feng Bujue said as he opened his mouth. Below his original tongue, a tongue that was identical to his original one poked out. "That way, I have completely confirmed the truth. As long as I convince myself that something is real, then it will come true." "Air, I say," Autumn Wind could not help but say, "why didn't you use my face is perfectly fine as an experiment? Wouldn't that be exposed?" Feng Bujue countered. Moriarty laughed wickedly. "Therefore, after confirming that killing us would end the game, you decided to kill us? Ha! Forgive me for being blunt, but isn't that a bit unwise?" He glanced at weighty words next to him. "If you had your partner say the truth directly with his assumption, wouldn't you have one?" Foo-foo. Holmes also took a puff from his cigarette. "It is indeed praiseworthy for you to be able to take out items from your dimensional pocket, but do you really wish to fight us?" His tone was still calm. "For us, using our thoughts and language to rewrite the truth here is something we have gotten used to. I only need a few seconds to convince myself that Feng Bujue is a rock, or Feng Bujue has been crushed into meat paste." He pointed at Brother Jew. "And you have already spent a lot of time convincing yourself that my dimensional pocket can be used, haven't you? How could you possibly win against us?" Brother Feng, "Looks like they're just trying to persuade you," weighty words said. "They're just pretending to be calm." "Humph. As long as I believe that Feng Bujue will not die, nothing will happen." Feng Bujue smiled. "When the truth that others believe is different from the truth that I believe, this is a simple battle of will." "Brother Feng, why do you have to?" Hong, who also did not understand. At that moment, as long as weighty words said assumption, the game would be won. So why was Feng Bujue so insistent on turning against the two bosses? "Do you still not get it?" Feng Bujue interrupted. "This place is just a mental world. That is why language and thoughts are so powerful here, and they even have the power to reverse order." The cuts on his face healed, and his tongue turned back into a single one. "In real life, our bodies are probably already inside the detective club, but our minds are trapped inside this so-called testing building." What Feng Bujue said next would not be heard by the bosses. "I only have one question for you. Do you want to clear this scenario as soon as possible, or do you want to follow me to see the truth of this scenario?" Hong Hu, Autumn Wind, and weighty words looked at each other. As professional players, sometimes they had to choose between fun and efficiency. The three of them had something similar to Brother Bujue in their bones, and that was a morbid curiosity. "Okay, let's do it your way," Hong Hu said. Weighty words added, "I will give my life to accompany the madman." Autumn Wind was still lying on a chair. "I'm trying to convince myself that my chest is not injured, so I can't stop you." "Ha!" Feng Bujue laughed. He raised the anti-gravity gun again and aimed the Nokia cannon at Moriarty. "Professor, I have to tell you with regret. No matter which dimension, no matter what kind of physics, no matter what kind of creature you are in, being hit by this thing means certain death." "Who?" The phone whizzed out from the catapult. Professor Moriarty watched in astonishment as the black shadow blasted towards his face. Almost at the same time, the system announcement came one after another. Current quest has been changed. Main quest has been updated. World building has been solved. Player Feng Bujue obtained 2,700 skill points as a reward. The team can now explore the rules of this scenario in the quest menu. You have entered the hidden plot. In the mission tab, the mission Defeat Sherlock Holmes and Moriarty in the Game of the Round Table was crossed out, and a new mission appeared below it. Defeat the real boss or escape from the detective club. Chapter 329. The feeling of falling, a sudden and violent fall. At the same time, there was pain all over their body. The change of scenery only took an instant. The four players seemed to wake up from a dream. They opened their eyes and realized that they were falling. Of course, it was only a drop of a few meters, so it was not enough to kill them. The four of them fell onto a crimson carpet. They groaned as they got up and looked up. There was a sea of books around them, and it looked like a library. There were 6 rows of tall bookshelves joined together to form a hexagon, and it surrounded them like a wall. The ceiling was about 10 meters high, and there were several chandeliers in sight. There was no problem with the lighting. Right above the 4 players hung a large square iron cage. At this moment, the iron plate at the bottom of the cage had already been opened. It seemed that this was the reason why they had fallen. This is the so-called real world. Autumn Wind asked as he reached out to touch his chest. Thankfully, the bloody hole had disappeared. Should be. Feng Bujue stood up from the ground. How are your life points? I'm practically unharmed, Hong Hu replied. Same for me, Weighty Word said. The damage from before seems to have disappeared, Autumn Wind replied. Feng Bujue's life points had returned to 96%. It looked like in the real world, their life points had been full until they fell from the iron cage. That's right, Feng Bujue said. The items that we obtained in the mental world have all disappeared. He was referring to the lighter, notebook, and wallet in his pocket. The consumables that I use in the memory space are still there, Autumn Wind said. With his reminder, Feng Bujue opened the menu again to inspect his inventory. He realized that the SCP-500 and the life points recovery potion that he had consumed earlier had returned as well. He looked at his skill tab, and the flying dragon fist that he had learned in the mental world was still there. In terms of items, we should have returned to how we were when we first entered the scenario, Feng Bujue said, but the skills I learned in the memory space have been retained. He scratched his chin and speculated. If I didn't learn this skill immediately and put in my inventory in the form of a skill card, maybe this thing would have disappeared. You're really lucky, Hong Hu said. You actually picked up a skill. Didn't you have the opportunity to learn as well? After chatting with the middle-aged Peter Pan for so long, you didn't take the opportunity to ask him to teach you how to fly? Feng Bujue replied. I did ask him for advice. Hong Hu replied. He told me that if I want to fly, I need the fairy's powder, and I need to believe that I can fly. He paused for a moment. Now that I think about it, this seems to be a hint of the truth. Unfortunately, at that time, I thought he was just talking about the setting of the original novel, so I didn't take it seriously. After Hong Hu said that, he added, oh, other than that, I also tried to ask him for advice on swordsmanship. He sighed. In the end, he said that in the second year after he left Neverland, he was arrested for possession of illegal knives, and his dagger was permanently confiscated by the relevant department. Sigh. The adult world is so scary. Autumn Wind sighed. Weighty Word said, aren't we all adults? What are you saying? Even though he said that, his tone was similar to Autumn Wind's. Feng Bujue said, looks like everyone here had a wonderful childhood. So when you grew up, you had this. I didn't know how lucky I was when I was born, Sai. Hong Hu looked at Brother Ju and said, let me guess. Brother Feng, you were not normal when you were young, right? Thankfully, my personality when I was 7 or 8 was not that different from now, Feng Bujue replied. Then, you were very abnormal, Autumn Wind said. In any case, at the time, I felt that children, including teenagers, were a group that was heavily discriminated against in society. Feng Bujue said, so, when I was 11, I wrote an essay called Stereotypical Prejudice Adults Have Toward Children. So, this means that among the billions of flowers in our country, there are one or two weirdos like you. After reading that, Autumn Wind's ability to ridicule had obviously improved. At the time, you were still Peachio. What do you know? Naturally, Fong Bujue would not be at a disadvantage in a verbal battle. Weighty words commented from the side, but, Brother Fong, you're indeed a weirdo. When I was 11 or 12, it was already difficult for me to write an essay of 500 words. Fong Bujue scoffed. So what? When I was 10 years old, I had already written my debut short story God of Swords in an exercise book by hand. For an essay of this length, I only need to sit on the toilet with my laptop, and I can finish it in the time it takes me to take a dump. They looked like they were chatting, but they were actually multitasking. Their hands and feet were not idle. The four of them were responsible for one direction each. As they talked, they looked at the surrounding bookshelves, trying to find a way to leave this area. If there is no other way, we can climb to the top of the bookshelf to take a look, Weighty Words said after observing the situation. We can first jump onto the iron cage and then use the iron chain to climb up. When we reach the same height as the top of the bookshelf, it'll be easy to jump up. Are you guys not going to consider reading all the books around us? Fong Bujue's reading addiction kicked in, and he said something that shocked the world. Autumn Wind lifted his head to look at the bookshelf that was about 8 meters tall and filled with books. He laughed drily. Even if the four of us split up and read until we're forced to disconnect, I'm afraid we won't even be able to finish the catalog. Hong, who did not participate in the three's banter, his attention was mainly on the hidden worldview. At that moment, in the expanded menu of the quest tab, the rules of this scenario had been written out. Hidden worldview, mental imprisonment. A powerful creature that has read many books has brought the players into his own mental world. In this world, every virtual character that he knows will become a living being with their own consciousness, and they will influence each other. Earlier, when X-23 was retrieving SCP-233, she was stopped because she was trying to enter the mental world of the boss. If not for that reason, the boss would not have been able to stop her. For an anomaly at X-23's level, invading a scenario from the inner world was nothing. Even the system could not stop it, much less the data of the 4 pillars of divinity. It's not that hard to leave this place. After Hong, who analyzed the worldview, he combined it with the mission. But the current mission seems to be hinting to us that the real boss is very powerful. He turned to look at his teammates. Is it really a good idea for us to leave this safe zone so hastily? Indeed, for main missions like defeat the real boss or escape from the detective club, it is usually because one of them is too difficult and might cause the whole team to be wiped out. Therefore, the system gives the players an easier way to clear the scenario, Autumn Wind added. And the higher the difficulty of the scenario, the more EXP and skill points you'll get, Fong Bujue said in an arrogant tone. But if we're wiped out, we'll lose everything, Hong, who interrupted. Even the risk factor has to be considered. Before we meet the real boss, no one knows how powerful he is. Fong Bujue said, we're all smart people. Now, we're all at full health, and our inventory is unlocked. We shouldn't underestimate ourselves, but objectively evaluate the overall strength of the team. He paused before adding, furthermore, this is just a normal team survival mode scenario. No matter how strong the hidden boss is, how strong can he be? I say, Brother Fong, based on what you said, you've killed a nightmare mode boss before? Weighty Words asked. Hong, who scratched his chin and said, Brother Fong hasn't reached level 30 yet, so he shouldn't be able to queue for team survival mode on nightmare mode. Looks like he cleared a nightmare mode in solo survival mode. Isn't that obvious? Fong Bujue replied matter-of-factly. We've been in open beta for almost a month already. Is clearing a nightmare mode something new? I've tried nightmare mode 3 times, and I died in the middle, Autumn Wind said. Weighty Words added, I've tried it 5 times, and I failed once as well. There were 2 times when I thought it was near the end of the plot, but I failed at the last step. Hong, who added, I'm a solo player. Unlike the professional players from the studio, I don't have a mission, so I've tried it more often. Since I reached level 15, I've tried solo survival mode on nightmare mode 26 times, and I've only cleared it once. He pushed on his glasses. To be honest, I've been through some setbacks in my life, and I'm not that mentally weak. But when it comes to nightmare mode, I really die without confidence. There were 2 or 3 times when I was scared out of the scenario due to the high terror points. Autumn Wind added, "But Brother Fong, you sound like it's normal for you to clear the scenario." That's not true. Fong Bujue started to act dumb. I've only cleared nightmare mode once, and that was a puzzle scenario without a boss battle. He shook his head. What I mean is, compared to the nightmare mode, where there are death flags everywhere, the boss of this normal mode scenario is nothing. Nothing. Suddenly, a strange voice rang out, interrupting the player's conversation. "If you think I am, then I can indeed become a ball." The voice came from all directions, echoing in the surroundings. What was most inconceivable was that this sound was exactly the same as the system's notification sound. The 4 players' expressions changed. After exchanging glances with each other, they said in unison, "Boss?" Chapter 330. 15 minutes earlier, in the real world, inside the detective club. At that moment, the 4 players were still trapped inside the iron cage. They were leaning against the wall, maintaining a kind of unconscious state. This state was not sleep or unconsciousness, but a process similar to waking up and dreaming. Their eyes were open, and their brains were working at high speed, but they could not hear, see, or feel that they were inside the iron cage. This was because their consciousness was trapped somewhere else. The iron cage was suspended in midair, surrounded by 6 rows of bookshelves that fit together closely, which formed a hexagonal area. Each side of the area was about 5 meters, and the height of each bookshelf was about 5 meters. The distance between the top of the bookshelf and the ceiling was to leave room for the chandelier. There were books on both sides of the bookshelves, and there was a partition in the middle. Even if the books were pulled out, they would not be able to see the space next to them, only the partition. If the players really climbed up the bookshelves, they would realize that around this hexagonal area, there were 6 similar hexagonal areas, and outside these 6 hexagonal areas, there was another circle. In total, there were 12 hexagonal areas, and so on and so forth. Looking down from the ceiling, the detective club was like a beehive that was made up by bookshelves. Each hexagonal area that was surrounded by bookshelves was like a beehive. But how big was the detective club? In any case, looking down from the top of the bookshelves, one could not see the end of this beehive at that moment. In an area not far away from the players, there was a giraffe that was pacing back and forth before one of the bookshelves. The last time I saw this book, the giraffe had a pair of glasses on its nose, and it was talking to itself. Suddenly, a low and hoarse male voice came from behind the giraffe. "It sure is not easy to find you." "Oh, it's you. What a rare visitor." The giraffe did not even turn to look, but it knew who the owner of the voice was. The next second, the giraffe started to change. In about 3 seconds, it first turned into a blurry pixel, then changed shape, size, and color. Finally, it became clear again and became a man. The image it transformed into was the Professor Moriarty that Fong Bujue and the others saw. "I heard that the Master of Time and the Court of Truth are looking for you and your friends." The transformed giraffe continued. "Don't tell me you came here to seek refuge." "Billy." His voice was no different from Moriarty's. Billy the puppet was still the same. He wore a black suit with a red bow tie and sat on a small tricycle. As for his face, it was still that scary white face. Of course not. Everyone knows that the Count of Script is absolutely neutral. Why would he accept a big problem like me? The Count of Script laughed. "Then why are you here?" In a situation where he didn't have any murderous intent, he added, "Could it be that you've joined the leader of demons and want to expand my detective club into his territory?" "Even if I'm at the end of my rope, I won't surrender to that guy," Billy replied. "Becoming his subordinate is more dangerous than surrendering myself." He paused before continuing. This time, I'm just here to ask you for a small favor, a small favor. Interesting, the Count of Scripts said. You came to ask me for a favor, which means that you can't do it yourself. Huh, how can that be a small favor? Billy replied, I just want to ask you to let those travelers from another world out of that cage. Release them? The Count of Script asked. You mean, release them from the detective club? Yes, Billy said. It's not that I don't want to, but... The Count of Script said slowly. If they want to leave, they have to at least escape from... He pointed at his head. Escape from my brain. Don't worry. Billy had the same expression on his face. With that person here, they will definitely escape. Oh, among the 4 visitors, one of them is your friend? The Count of Script asked. Not exactly a friend, but we've interacted a few times, and I owe him a favor, Billy replied. I know he will be able to escape from your brain. I also know that once he and his friends escape, you will make your move, so... I see, the Count of Scripts said. You want to make use of this chance to help him so that we don't owe each other anything. At this point, his appearance changed into Sherlock Holmes. The Count of Scripts said in an English accent, Indeed, for me, this is as easy as lifting a finger. After all, it's just sending them out. Sending them out, or sending them out, is the same, but... He took a puff from the pipe. Why should I follow your order? He shrugged. We don't have any friendship between us, and you don't have the ability to threaten me with force. However, I have heard some rumors about you being crafty. His tone did not change. It was very relaxed, but the content of his words gradually became dangerous. You trespassed into my territory and ordered me around, but I don't care about that. But what if this is your plan to create a misunderstanding between me and one of the 4 pillars of divinity? If you don't want to follow my order, Billy interrupted. You can pretend that I've never been here. You can kill them as you please. In fact, I'm just passing by. He said in a nonchalant tone, It's easy to return this favor. I'll have other chances in the future. To be honest, even if I don't return it, it's fine. Billy turned the tricycle like he was about to leave. Then, sorry for the interruption, and wait a minute. The Count of Script stopped him. If that's the case, I have a suggestion. Billy raised his head. What is it? I can help you with this, the Count of Script said, as long as you tell me some information that I'm interested in. He titled his head and smiled. For you, this is just a matter of moving your lips. You don't even need to raise your hand. What do you want to know? Billy asked coldly. I heard, you've been close to the anomalies in the inner world, the Count of Script said. The Count of Script said, coincidentally, not long ago, one of their members came to visit my mental world and took away an SCP item. When he said that, he changed his form again. This time, the Count of Script turned into Little Red Riding Hood, and her voice turned into a female voice. I just want to ask, do you know about the legendary Anomaly 0? Chapter 331. You do not belong to my world and are not under my jurisdiction, so there is no need for you to call me boss, the system voice continued. My name is the Count of Script. From a name, it sounds like a super powerful boss, Autumn Wind whispered. The cautious, weighty words took out a pistol from his inventory, opened the safety, and looked up cautiously. Put away your useless weapon, traveler from another world, the Count of Script said calmly. Bullets pose no threat to me. Before he could finish his sentence, a silver metal sphere with a diameter of 1 meter appeared in front of the player's eyes. The ball floated between the ceiling and the bookshelf. It slowly moved to the hexagonal area where the players were. The Count of Script's voice that was similar to the system voice came from this metallic ball. However, I do not wish for you to use those crude and boring weapons to destroy the books around you. You're the owner of this detective club, right? Feng Bujue raised his head to ask. Earlier, we were trapped in your mental world. Huh, that is not accurate, the Count of Script said. The Count of Script said, you make it sound like I'm the one who forced you in and did not let you out. He chuckled. But in fact, you all relied on your own willpower to barge in without permission, didn't you? The players could not deny that. After all, this was a scenario in a game, and they had volunteered to enter it. Ambitionist looked up at the metal ball and said, All right, we'll treat it as us coming uninvited. So, what do you plan to do now? I am here to take something, the Count of Script said. Then, I will politely ask you to leave this place. As he said that, he descended from the sky. The four players each took a side of the hexagonal area, and the metal sphere circled around the iron cage and landed in the middle of the four players. The next second, the Count of Script's appearance changed. He turned from a ball into an old man in a wheelchair. The old man was wearing a black suit and had a head full of white hair. His face looked very old, but his expression revealed a kind of wisdom and peace. This appearance and voice. The Count of Script's voice turned gentle and infectious. Perhaps it will make you feel more at ease. The freedom you mentioned is basically the same as letting down one's guard, right? Xiao Feng said. Do you know? The two qualities that you traveler from another world have that I hate the most are your belligerence and paranoia. The Count of Script sneered. If I really wanted to kill you, you would have been torn to pieces the moment your consciousness came here. You said you wanted to take something away. Honghu asked again. What do you mean? There shouldn't be anything on us that belongs to you. No. The Count of Script shook his head with a smile. Each of you has a key, don't you? The expressions of the four changed. I did get a key in my memory space, weighty words replied. But when I arrived here, the key was no longer with me. Feng Bujua looked at his teammates and asked, What's wrong? You guys also got the cursed key in your memory space? Cursed key? Weighty words asked. That can't be right. Mine is called the pardon key. I also got one. It's called the blessed key, Xiao Feng said. When Ambitionist heard what the three of them said, he did not say much. He simply said, the key of repentance. Feng Bujua thought about it and turned to tell the Count of Script. After we came to this real world, all the items on us returned to their original state. He paused. The key you mentioned has disappeared. Disappeared? Ha! After uncovering the truth, you guys didn't understand anything? The Count of Script smiled. Here there. Reality, illusion. Where's the boundary? You want to convince us that world is real? Feng Bujua asked with some thought. The Count of Script replied, What if I told you? The fantasy world constructed by a creature's brain and the so-called real world that the creature lives in are actually two parallel dimensions. His eyes scanned the faces of all the players. Then, which world do you think is real? Based on your hypothesis, Honghu said, doesn't that mean that every single one of us with intelligence has become a creator? Why not? The Count of Script said, a world in a grain of sand, a heaven in a flower, a Bodhi in a tree, and a Buddha in a leaf. Perhaps you and I are just the imagination of another consciousness. Our existence is part of a script, and we are trapped in an endless cycle made from conflict and contradiction, death and rebirth. He seemed to have thought of something interesting. He paused and sneered. Maybe you can't understand it now, but it doesn't matter. We have a lot of time. Let's talk about the key after I'm done with the details. After the Count of Script said that, his whole head suddenly twisted. From his neck up, he morphed into Sherlock Holmes, and his voice changed as well. There's a saying from Shakespeare that is often quoted. In the eyes of 1,000 people, there are 1,000 Hamlets. He raised his hand and pointed at his face. The Mr. Holmes that you saw earlier is the one in my eyes. Honestly, this scene, at least from the player's perspective, was very strange. However, the Count of Script did not think so. He continued, This man is cold, humorous, alert, and calm. He has a casual side to him, but most of the time, his will is firm. He has a long face, thick brows, black hair, an aquiline nose, and thin lips. When he speaks with a standard British accent, fast and high pitch, and his trademark is the pipe and cane. At this point, the Count of Script's head turned back to the old man, and in another person's mind, the image of Sherlock Holmes will be different. Even in Conan Doyle's mind, Sherlock Holmes is constantly changing. He was originally a talented detective, but in the end, he became an illusion sought after by greedy publishers and crazed readers. Even if he is no longer as good as he used to be, no one will care. So, Feng Bujua said, Every character that we met in the examination building is the Hamlet that you created after reading the original novel. No, every one of them has their own consciousness, the Count of Script said. The Count of Script said, I am not their creator, but I am the creator of the world they live in. He waved his hand. Just as Moriarty, Sherlock Holmes, and Little Red Riding Hood have told you, in that world, they have their own set of rules. For some things, even if I want to interfere, it is not that easy. So, this is like a serialized comic. At the later stage, the author himself might not be able to control the development of the plot. Chiu Feng chimed in. Haha, not bad. Your comprehension is much better than those in the same dimension as me. The Count of Script smiled. His words caused the players to be shocked. It was normal for a character in a game to say something like that, but what he said seemed to mean that he knew that he was just a set of data. Feng Bujue, who had interacted with the anomalies several times, was even more shocked. He could not help but think, could it be that these high-level data are all unique and can store memories? Then, aren't they similar to the anomalies? But what worried Feng Bujue the most was, if these AIs could really understand their situation, what would they do? The Count of Script was still talking. But you are not as high and mighty as you think. He revealed a meaningful look. You have many questions, and I have all the answers that you want. But from your perspective, you can understand some of the answers, and some of them you cannot. For example, at this moment, the question that you're most eager to ask is how to clear the scenario. The players were speechless. They did not know how to respond to this hidden boss before them, and they had no idea whether this Count of Script was still a boss or not. I can explain it in a way that you can understand, allowing you to make a simple and direct choice, and then there will be an inevitable result, the Count of Script said. I can also give you the answer that you cannot understand, and what kind of phenomenon will that cause? He shrugged. Unfortunately, I have no idea. This is because only creatures with subnormal intelligence, in other words, imperfect but extremely arrogant humans like you, can find the answer. You are the sharpest con man I've ever met in my life. Please accept my kneeling. When Chiu Feng mocked him, he really wanted to kneel. Ha ha! The Count of Script guffawed. All right, you'd better leave. The wheelchair under him turned on its own so that it was facing Feng Bujue. Billy asked me to pass you a message. Feng Bujue was startled before asking, The puppet Billy? Yes, he said, this is his way of repaying you for the help you gave him during the prison break, the Count of Script said. Feng Bujue thought about it for several seconds before asking, Is that why you came personally to let us go? The Count of Script nodded. Otherwise, you would have to figure out a way to get the keys and find the exit. He snapped his fingers, and 4 differently shaped keys appeared before the 4 players. After a second, they flew into the Count of Script's hands. The players naturally recognized them. They were the keys that they had obtained from their memory space. I'll take them back. The Count of Script pointed at the middle of a bookshelf, and a book fell from the shelf. The back door of the club is open for you. At this point, the Count of Script's form changed again, and he turned into a white crane. It flapped its wings and flew up. With a shrill voice, it said, I hope you will not return here, humans. Chapter 332. With a flash of white light, Feng Bujue returned to the login lobby. On the screen, the reward calculation for the scenario soon appeared. The scenario has been completed. Calculating reward. Obtained EXP 120000. Game coins 100000. Obtained equipment none. Missions completed March 3rd. Completed special and hidden missions 0. Unlocked world building, mental imprisonment. Time of terror points increase 0. Highest terror points 0%. Average terror points 0%. Your terror rating is Embodiment of Valor. Extra reward obtained. Please choose later. Obtain skill points 3. 580-inch additional bonus skill points. EXP 35800. Game coins 100000. Scenario cleared reward. Randomly draw a learnable skill card. Calculation complete. Please continue. At the same time, the system said, you have reached level 29. Maximum stamina points has increased to 2900, 2900. Finally, I'm 29. Feng Buju mumbled as he looked at the menu. The process of him and his teammates leaving the detective club was so easy that it was hard to believe. After the count of script flew away, they took more than a minute to recover from their shock and break the silence. The four discussed what had happened earlier. Feng Buju told them about his encounter with Billy the puppet and explained the last few sentences that the boss had said. However, there were many strange things about this hidden boss that confused the players. They then went to pick up the book that the boss had pointed at to see what the back door meant. To their surprise, when they opened the book, they were transported into a chaotic and twisted space. They received the notification that all the main quests had been completed, and they would be teleported out in 180 seconds. If I knew this would happen, I wouldn't have opened that book. Feng Buju grumbled to himself with annoyance. There seems to be plenty of information to be found in that detective club. He had a feeling that this count of script was important in the game, perhaps even more valuable than the 4 pillars of divinity. Right then, several notifications came, and Feng Buju's attention returned to the screen. The friend requests from Autumn Wind and Weighty Words came in just like that. Hong, who really didn't send a friend request to Brother Ju. It seemed like his personality was similar to Feng Buju's. Feng Buju thought about it and accepted it. This time, his friend list was really strong, including Shiva, 7 Kills, and Shadow King. He could form an all-star team. After adding her as a friend, he immediately walked out of the elevator and went to the storage room to collect the rest of the rewards. However, after taking a few steps, he suddenly thought of something. Wait, Billy seems to have messed up the hidden plot. He tilted his head and said, according to the count of script, it seems like Billy begged for mercy on my behalf, so he let us go. Without Billy's help, the count of script would appear as an enemy or not at all. Feng Buju frowned. In that scenario, we would have to rely on ourselves to solve the puzzle and figure out how to summon the 4 keys and escape from the detective club. Or we would have to actively seek out the count of script and kill him. That was Feng Buju's way of thinking. In other words, he was a man who did not know what was good for him. Actually, Billy had helped him a lot this time. It was obvious. Defeat the real boss or escape from the detective club. For this mission, he could only choose the latter. The power of the count of script had been described by X23 earlier. He was second only to the 4 pillars of divinity. In other words, he was a world boss in Thriller Paradise. His data was unique and closely related to the changes in the game world. To put it this way, to face this kind of boss, one needed to find 6 strong players with top equipment and then consider killing him. With the current progress of the game, even if the top 6 players on the combat stat ranking teamed up, they wouldn't be able to kill this guy. And Feng Buju wanted to kill the count of script. That was pure fantasy. Mainly because Brother Ju had not faced many setbacks since he started the game. Facing boss-level monsters like Samontier and Billy, he had never lost. Therefore, he had the misconception that all the monsters mentioned in the mission could be killed. In reality, there were plenty of powerful bosses that the players could not kill. Most of them, the players did not even have the chance to challenge them. Take the 4 pillars of divinity as an example. Since the game was released, no player in Thriller Paradise had faced the 4 pillars of divinity in battle. Even though there were posts on the forum that discussed the game behind the scenes, and many people pieced together the information and described the 4 pillars of divinity quite well, that was all side evidence. No one had really fought them. When the system generated the scenario, it would not give a bunch of players who were not even level 30 the chance to challenge the 4 pillars of divinity. At most, they would be mentioned in some scenarios or have them make cameo appearances. Just like in the scenario where Feng Buju encountered the Master of Time, he only heard a voice. Even if he wanted to attack the Master of Time, he did not know how to do so. Okay, let's see what I've gotten this time. Feng Buju walked to the first glass tube and drew the reward for clearing the scenario. His mastery level was usually very high, and a learnable skill card could be a skill for any mastery. Of course, what Feng Bujua wanted the most at that moment was a summoning skill. Unfortunately, he was not that lucky. Name: Stinky Chicken Bullet Skill Card Property. Active skill, disappears after one use skill type. Marksmanship effect: shoot a stinky egg at the target, causing a lot of aggro and causing the target to attack you. You have to use a marksmanship weapon to activate this skill. Weapon type is not limited. Consumption: 1 stamina point learning requirement. Marksmanship Deary Mark. Cannot be used on other players. P.S. Many people told me that I must have lost my mind when I designed this skill, but Bob from the R&D department told me that this skill is not that bad, so I kept it. What kind of trash is this? Feng Bujue could not help but grumble. This kind of useless effect, and it is a one-time consumable skill? What kind of scam is this? He wished that he could toss the skill card to the ground, but then he thought about it. Since it was a one-time consumable skill, it would not occupy his skill bar for too long. Furthermore, the effect was so horrible that no one would want it even if he sold it. Therefore, he might as well learn it. After all, he had nothing to lose. Chapter 333. That's all I got from queuing up such a long scenario. When Feng Bujue came to the second glass tube, he was still grumbling to himself. What is the meaning of the PS in the remark? Is it a programmer's self-criticism? To put it bluntly, this is a set of data that should have been deleted. Please select your additional reward. 1. A random piece of equipment corresponding to your level. 2. 50,000 game coins. 3. 116,000 EXP. The familiar window popped up before Feng Bujua's eyes, but this time, he did not choose it immediately. My current EXP is 13430290000. If I add 116,000 then, Feng Bujue calculated quickly in his mind. 250,300 EXP. I still need around 40,000 EXP to reach level 30. He thought to himself, even though I've gained so much EXP, it's still not enough to level up. I still need to queue up for another scenario. So why don't I draw a random piece of equipment? Since the reward for clearing the scenario was a disappointment, Feng Bujue decided to take a gamble. He hoped that he would be able to win something from the lucky draw. Thus, he once again put his luck on the line and chose to draw the random equipment reward. After the white light converged, a bowl-sized, arc-shaped metal piece appeared in the glass pillar. When Feng Bujue saw the piece of equipment for the first time, he instinctively lowered his head to look at his chest. TSK. No way. He frowned. Even if it's really that thing, there should be 2 of them. Obviously, he had misunderstood the situation. Name: Alchemy Amplification Device Item Type. Armor, Quality, Excellent Defense Points. Slightly Weak Element. None Special Effect. Slightly increase the effect of Summoning Skills Equip Requirement. Summoning F Remark. This item can be equipped on either knee. It cannot be removed or equipped in the scenario, and the maximum life points of the wearer will be lowered by 10%. Oh, knee guard, I thought it was that thing. Feng Bujue mumbled as he picked up the item and pressed it on his right knee. When a metal piece touched Feng Bujue's knee, it heated up like a hot iron. After a strong burning sensation, the piece of equipment was branded on Feng Bujue's knee in the form of suction. He lowered his head to look, and he could see a circle glowing red on the surface of the knee guard. Of course, he had no idea what this circle represented. TSK. If only I could have read the book about alchemy advancement. Feng Bujue was still brooding over the fact that he failed to understand the book from the previous scenario. He then hid the equipment and changed it to only show the status of the clothing. The problem? I don't have any summoning skills. After Feng Bujue equipped the equipment, he opened the game menu and said, "How about we leave this in the storage room for now?" With that thought in mind, Feng Bujue felt uncomfortable. The character mission, use summoning skills and successfully summon creatures 50 times, was stuck at 1450, and that was already a knot in his heart. And this time, he had drawn an equipment related to summoning. This feeling It would be a waste if he did not use his summoning skills in the scenario. The summoning skills at the auction house are all incredibly expensive, and for things like skills, those that are put up for sale are mostly useless, or else people would have learned them themselves. He glanced at the stinky chicken bullet in his skill tab. Spending more than 100,000 to buy a skill like this is obviously not worth it. Feng Bujue thought about it. Right, thriller box. He suddenly realized there was another way for him to buy a summoning skill, and that was through the thriller box. Other than equipment, the thriller box also sold skill cards. However, the number of skill cards that were lost in the scenario was very small compared to the number of equipment. Therefore, in the first week of the open beta, the thriller box did not open the search list for skill cards. 1 week later, all the skill cards and equipment that Chungu had accumulated earlier appeared inside the thriller box, and the 7-day countdown began. Currently, Feng Bujue's skill points had reached 17,980 points. In the entire server, even players with a higher level than him might not have accumulated as many skill points as he did. Therefore, Brother Ju still had some capital to spend. Feng Bujue returned to the login lobby. After the elevator door closed, he pressed the button for Thriller Box and entered the small room with the floor that looked like a chessboard. The 4 walls were filled with mirrors, and there was a large gift box placed in the middle. Opening the menu, he very purposely selected the skill tab and selected the summoning option. With this kind of purposeful search, 8 pages popped up, each with 100 items. As mentioned earlier, on the Thriller Box's search list, one could only see the name, type, and price of the item. To see the details, one had to click on them. However, now that Feng Bujue had selected the summoning skill, he could basically ignore the type tab. For something like a skill, just the name alone was far from enough. Therefore, Brother Ju, who had not been able to read a single book in the detective club, decided to satisfy his craving inside the Thriller Box. There were almost 800 skills. It was not that much, but it was not that little either. Even though some of them were beyond Feng Bujue's purchasing power, he did not plan to let them go. After all, he was in sleeping mode, so he was not in a hurry to do anything. 3.5 hours passed in the blink of an eye. With his perverted patience and focus, as well as his continuous and efficient browsing speed, Feng Bujue finished reading all the skill cards. After clicking on the last skill on the last page, he stood up. After reading for 3 minutes, he pulled out the stool from his inventory and sat down. He put the stool away and started to pace back and forth. The scary thing about him was not only that he could finish reading so much information, but the key was that he could still remember the information after reading it. And when he did, he could compare the information in his mind. Another 15 minutes passed, and Feng Bujue stopped moving. He clicked open the interface of the Thriller Box again. After flipping through a few pages, he selected a skill card. Name, Summoning, Musashi Kajinshi, Skill Card Property. Active, Permanent Skill Type. Summoning Effect. Summon Musashi Kojinshui as your partner. Cooldown time. 80 minutes. Active time. 20 minutes. Maximum of 1 Musashi Kojinshui at one time. Consumption. Perform a strange action. Learning requirement. Summoning F. Remark. He is a third-year elementary school student. Due to his belief that all great men are called freaks when they are young, he became a freak. His body can turn at high speed and move on any surface. He often hisses and makes strange noises with unclear meaning. He has a very high IQ and can come up with many strange inventions. Furthermore, his family seems to be very rich. Okay, I choose you. Feng Bujue used 480 skill points to acquire this skill. It was 20 points cheaper than when he bought Casey Jones' mask. At first glance, this was a summoned creature that was useless in battle. But in reality, he was indeed useless. But then again, an F-grade summoned creature was not of much use in the first place. For example, summoning. Sailor was already considered very powerful among grade F summoning skills, so summoning required the consumption of a specific item, spinach. Other grade F summoned creatures like bats, limping zombies, hockey sticks that could fly, and so on were basically cannon fodder. Their main purpose was to stall and scout. Feng Bujue filtered through the descriptions of the useless grade F summoned creatures in his mind for a long time and realized that only Musashi, the crazy brat, was able to summon creatures with high intelligence. Then, from a non-combat point of view, Musashi was definitely more useful than other creatures of the same grade. Of course, Feng Bujue also hesitated on whether to buy the other summoning skill, summoning toilet paper. This skill was completely useless and did not require any skill points. Its only advantage was that it only had a cooldown of 10 minutes. But the cost of this skill was as high as 1,400 skill points. Obviously, the original intention behind the design of this skill was for players who needed to repeatedly use their summoning skills. It was not impossible to buy both skills, but since he had already obtained the method to complete his character's mission, he might as well save the 1,400 skill points. Later, I'll just randomly arrange a scenario and summon him for a chat, Feng Bujue said to himself after learning the skill. As a writer who did not do his job, or rather, went out to collect material, naturally, he had read all kinds of material. Piggy Sunny Day was one of his favorite works. Among them, the character he was most interested in was Musashi. The reason was probably some kind of resonance between weirdos. After buying the skill card, Feng Bujue finally returned to the login lobby. He had been wandering around the thriller box for almost 4 hours. Other than those professional players who were out of work, it was hard to find a casual player who would stay outside the scenario for so long. No matter what, I'll have to level up to 30 tonight before I log off, Feng Bujue said to himself. Then, an idea popped into his mind. The cooldown time to summon Musashi was 80 minutes, but if he entered the scenario and summoned Musashi, he would die not long after that. Then, he could queue for a new scenario and summon Musashi again. With that plan in mind, Feng Bujue chose the solo survival mode on nightmare difficulty. Even if he did not clear the scenario, he could still experiment with his new skill. Chapter 334. Feng Bujue, Level 29. Please select the game mode that you wish to join. You have selected single-player survival mode, Nightmare. Please confirm. Confirmed. Generating scenario. Downloading. Please wait a moment. Welcome to Thriller Paradise. This time, the voice that read the script sounded very familiar. It was like the low male voice that appeared in the trailers of Western blockbusters. Download complete. You're currently playing single-player survival mode, Nightmare. A scenario introduction is provided in this mode, and there's a chance to trigger hidden side quests and special world building. Reward for clearing the scenario. When the reward is calculated, you will gain 80% extra EXP from clearing the scenario. Playing the scenario introduction soon. The game will start immediately after that. Oh, this reward is quite good, Feng Bujue said after seeing the hint. Even though the time required for single-player survival mode will be shorter, this is Nightmare mode, so the reward will not be bad. 80% extra EXP is basically double the reward. Actually, there was nothing to be excited about. For those players who used the double EXP booster card, every scenario would give them 100% extra EXP. Then, the introductory cinematic started to play. The image that appeared before Feng Bujue's eyes was something that looked like a paper-cut animation. It looked very childish and cartoony. But when Feng Bujue saw the first scene, his expression shifted, and he gasped. No way. In the image, there was a blue sky, white clouds, and the sun was shining. There was a dark green mountain range in the distance, and the peak of the mountain was covered in white snow. The camera panned down, and there were many quadrangular houses of different colors. A flat gray road ran through the front of those houses. This is a small town in Colorado, United States. No. Feng Bujue repeated himself like he was trying to hypnotize himself. Impossible. This is impossible. This is a quiet, small, useless, rural, remote, nameless, childish, shabby, far-minded, hillbilly, right-wing, flat-headed, truck-driving, outdated, old-fashioned, inbred, messy, outdated, remote, poor, bunkered, a small mountain village. This is, at this point, in the close-up of the cinematic, a wooden sign appeared on the snowy ground. The words South Park were written on it. South Park. Ah! Fong Bujue screamed. 1 second later, he screamed again. He did not know why he did this. According to the accurate data from the United States Department of Homeland Security, the world is experiencing a serious economic and ecological crisis. The reason for this is the Peruvian flute band. They are spread to be a Peruvian flute band. In certain areas, on average, there are 65 Peruvian flute bands. And all of this will be stopped this morning. At this point, the scenario started. At that moment, Fong Bujue had morphed into the style of the scenario, a flat paper cut style. He was standing on a snowy mountain near South Park. Underneath his feet was a thick layer of snow, and around him were several sparse trees. The sun was shining brightly above him, and his field of vision was wide. He could see the small town at the foot of the mountain, and there was nothing special about it. The strange thing was, even though he was surrounded by snow, he did not feel cold. Physically speaking, the temperature was about 20 degrees, and the humidity was just right. It was a very comfortable situation. Am I going to die? Fong Bujue was breaking out in cold sweat. He had not seen him so nervous in any of the scenarios before. Flute band. He quickly searched through his memory for anything related to South Park. I've got it. The 10th to 11th episode of the 12th season, Pandemic. Fong Bujue had a general idea of the plot already, and almost at the same time, the system announcement came. Okay, main quest triggered. Survive the attack of Jimbo and Ned. Fong Bujue's face was twitching, and he immediately looked around cautiously. Don't tell me those two are hunting. Just as he mumbled that to himself, he heard a loud shout coming from afar. It's coming at us. As soon as the roar was heard, the sound of submachine gun fire followed closely behind. Fong Bujue did not even need to think to know that the bullets were aimed at him. He hugged his head and ran away from the sound. In reality, his reaction was already too slow. If he ran after hearing the gunshot, he would not be able to outrun the bullets. Thankfully, Fong Bujue had Artemis's Embrace and Echo armor. So even though he was hit by more than 10 bullets in 2 seconds, he did not lose any life points. Fong Bujue used 5 seconds to hide behind a large rock, temporarily entering the enemy's blind spot. But just as he took half a breath, he heard Jimbo yelling at Ned from afar. Ned, it's hiding behind a rock. Drop the bomb. When Ned replied, he sounded like a robot. Ned's throat cancer was caused by excessive smoking, and he had lost his right arm in the war, so he needed a speaker to hold against his throat to speak. He used his magnetic, electronic voice and always a flat tone to reply. Understood. Fong Bujue had no choice but to move away from his original position. As he ran, he shouted, I am a human. However, his voice was drowned out by the sound of machine gun fire and the subsequent explosion. This is not going to work. Fong Bujue soon realized the severity of the situation. His life points were already at 90% due to the alchemy amplification device. Even with the protection of powerful equipment, it was impossible for him to remain unscathed after being repeatedly shot by automatic rifles. Furthermore, Jimbo and Ned's firepower was at the level of an arms dealer. Who knew what they would come up with? Fong Bujue did not want to waste too much time on them. Instead of rushing to them to prove that he was a human being, he decided to run. Once he entered the town, these two hunting maniacs would not dare to do anything rash. With that in mind, Chun Gu activated body enhancement spell. He morphed into a shadow, circled around the enemy's firepower, and raced down the mountain. At the beginning of the scenario, Fong Bujue did not even have the chance to experiment with the summoning skill before he was forced to run for his life. He knew very well that in the world of South Park, there was no place and no character that was safe. No one's intelligence, logic, and morals could be trusted. The place looked peaceful, but for an outsider like him, it was more dangerous than hell. Chapter 335. Fong Bujue raced down the hill. After running for about 1 minute, he could no longer hear the gunshots behind him, so he deactivated body enhancement spell. By then, he had 62% of his life points left, so he was relatively safe. South Park was a typical rural American town. There were no skyscrapers, no traffic jams, and no horrible air quality. However, even though it was small, it had everything. The town had everything. There was a church, a government building, a post office, a school, a shopping center, and so on. Once phone Buju entered the town, the system announcement came. Current quest completed. Main quest updated. When the previous quest was ticked off, a new quest appeared. Search the town and be prepared before the start of the catastrophe. Preparation? Phone Buju scoffed. To be honest, he really did not know how to prepare, because the content of the catastrophe was too hard to describe. I guess I should go get some heavy weapons first. Phone Buju thought about it and decided to rob a gun shop. There was only one gun shop in South Park, and it was owned by Jimbo and Ned. These two were good friends who had participated in the Vietnam War together. They were both single, and they ran the gun shop together. The two would often go hunting in the mountains. They had even done a TV show about hunting. I know you were thinking, hey, they must have gone through a period of picking up soap when they were in the military. But that should not be the case. Phone Buju used a very normal and polite tone to ask for direction from passerby, and the person told him the location of the gun shop. 5 minutes later, Phone Buju arrived at the shop that faced the street. It was a one-story building. The outer wall was made of brown brick, and the roof was slightly wider than the outer wall. There were no windows on the front of the building. In the middle of the building was a double sliding glass door with a metal frame and frosted glass. Each door had the words Jimbo Guns written in white paint. Above the door was a large signboard with yellow lettering on a black background. The same words were written on the signboard. On the left side of the door, there was an advertisement board. It was also black with yellow words. Under the words Jimbo Gun Shop, there were the words buy, sell, transact, and consignment. On the right side of the door, there was a wooden ammunition canister and a large wooden carriage wheel. They were probably decorations. When Phone Buju came to the door, the sign behind the glass door said closed. After Brother Ju tested the door to confirm that it was locked, he took out the wrench to break the glass and reached his hand into the door to open the lock. The reason he dared to do this was simple. He knew that Jimbo and Ned weren't in the store at the moment. If he didn't know this, he wouldn't have dared to barge in. Forcing his way in didn't trigger any alarms, and that was within Phone Buju's expectations. You'll find out soon enough. Brother Ju pushed the door open and walked in. Inside the gun shop, on the walls to the left and right of the front door, there was a rabbit head and a rabbit tail. They were the kind that had not even been washed clean of blood. Under the rabbit head was a yellow warning sign. On the sign was the picture of a black pistol. In red, it said, "Ammunition isn't cheap, so we don't fire warning shots." Under the rabbit tail was a white warning sign. On it was a yellow circular smiley face. In black, it said, "Please remove your gun. Please remove your ski cap. Thank you." If the hint from these two signs was not obvious enough, then let's continue to look. There were many cabinets placed neatly around the place. They were filled with various models of firearms. Rifles were the majority. Other than that, there were some ski jackets that were commonly used for hunting in the mountains. Phone Buju did not stand on ceremony. He casually grabbed a blue and green jacket from the wall and put on. Walking up to the counter, Chun Xiaolian saw that there were 3 layers of pistols in the waist-high glass cabinet. On the shelf behind the counter, in addition to a box of ammunition, there was a row of display firearms from top to bottom. They were the G3 automatic rifle, no attachments, the SPAS 12 shotgun, no attachments, the M40A3 sniper rifle, the M733 commando submachine gun, grenade attachment, and the classic Colt M1873 revolver. The position and height of the row of guns was right behind the cash register. In other words, they were within easy reach of the salesperson Jimbo. He could grab one just by turning around. Next to the row of guns, on the most eye-catching part of the wall, there were 2 warning signs. On the top of the sign was a white one. In black and red, it said, "Intruders will be killed on the spot. If they're not killed, we will make up for it." Below the sign was a black one. There was a logo of a white pistol. In white and red, it said, "We are protected by the Second Amendment of the Constitution." Chun Xiaoyan turned to look to the right of the counter. There was a square window there. On the wall next to the window, there was a dead headless snake. Its body was still bleeding. On another round plate, there was a pair of severed rabbit ears. Below the ears was a warning sign. This one was orange, and the words were black and red. "Criminals, can you run at 850 feet per second? If you can't, then you'd better have a bulletproof head." Chun Xiaoyan turned to the left of the counter. There was a map of the United States hanging on the wall. However, the map was not marked with place names. Instead, it was marked with a green pen. It marked out the places where the no retreat in the United States law was used. There were a total of 4 states that encouraged civilians to open fire. There were also 9 states that did not recommend shooting to kill. These 9 places were marked with a red cross. Next to the map was a side door. There was a sign hanging on the door that said, "Only for Ned." There were 2 slogans pasted on the side of the sign. "We don't bother calling the police," and "Be careful of the owner." Feng Bujue felt like he was sitting on pins and needles when he was stealing from the gun shop. Every 5 seconds, he had to raise his head to look at the various entrances to prevent the 2-gun maniacs from returning to the shop and going on a killing spree. Thankfully, that did not happen. Even though the characters in South Park could do some crazy things like eating with their buttocks and excreting with their mouths, most of the time, their combat ability was no different from that of a normal human being. Therefore, Jimbo and Ned would not have been able to return to the gun shop in such a short amount of time. 5 minutes later, Feng Bujue had already stuffed several heavy weapons into his backpack. He also stuffed pistols and a bunch of ammo into his clothes. Then, he quickly left the place to prevent more trouble. Since he did not get the additional 40% EXP from the previous scenario, when he saw the 80% EXP from this scenario, Feng Bujue was quite tempted. He tossed the thought of using the summoning skill once, and then died to the back of his mind and started to focus on clearing the scenario. At that moment, Feng Bujue did not have the time to summon Musashi or study the power of this summoned creature. This was because once the catastrophe arrived, the threat of death would be everywhere, and it would follow him like a shadow. Brother Ju was such a person. If there was no difficulty, he would do it, but if there was one, he would do it. He would grumble about the game's inhumane difficulty while enjoying himself. That was his usual style. His next stop was the hospital. After obtaining sufficient weapons and ammunition, the second type of material that needed to be obtained was definitely medical supplies. Even for a rich player who did not lack money, they would not leave the resources in the scenario untouched, much less Feng Bujue. Before leaving Jimbo's gun shop, Feng Bujue randomly pulled out a map of the small town from a shelf near the door. After confirming the address of the hospital, he set off. To prevent unnecessary trouble, he did not consider stealing a car or taking a taxi. After all, there were very few taxis in South Park. He walked the whole way. After all, the town was not that big, and he would reach his destination after walking for a while. The large guns were hidden inside his backpack. From the outside, Feng Bujue did not look that suspicious. The streets of the small town were relatively empty, and running down the street would be too obvious, so Feng Bujue walked quickly. After walking for a while, his eyes caught something out of the corner of his eyes. This was an electrical appliance store. Outside the street, there were many televisions in the display window facing the street. At this moment, the televisions were broadcasting major news. In the news, a large group of fully armed American soldiers rushed out of military helicopters and armored vehicles to arrest the Peruvian flute bands in various places. What was even more hilarious was that after the people were taken away, the boxes, instruments, CDs, and so on left by the band on the street were actually recovered by a group of soldiers wearing full sets of isolation protective suits with metal clips. It was as if the items that the Peruvian flute bands came into contact with were infected with a biochemical virus. Feng Bujue leaned closer to the window to listen, and he could hear the voice on the screen. The government's operation to solve the crisis of the Peruvian flute bands has entered its 3rd day. The Peruvian flute bands in all the major cities around the world have been evacuated and quarantined, but there are still some that have escaped. The Department of Homeland Security requests. When a news anchor said these words, the screen was interspersed with several sets of arrest images. When he said the word request, the screen showed subtitles. If you see the Peruvian flute band, do not approach them. Note down their location and report to the authorities. Under no circumstances, do not buy their CDs. The Peruvian flute bands have been apprehended and are being escorted to the quarantine zone in Miami. Seeing this, Phone Bujua moved away from the window. He mumbled, "It is already the afternoon of the third day. The disaster will break out around the world before sunset. I have to hurry." 10 minutes later, he followed the main road of the small town and arrived at the only hospital in South Park, Hell Passage Hospital. No matter how many times I see the name of this hospital, I still feel like complaining. Phone Bujua said with his head up at the entrance of the hospital before he walked in. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.